These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps Hair Loss Treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
Thom Hartmann University Book Club today. We're reading from It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America by David K. Johnston. This is from page 61, the chapter titled Forgetting the Forgotten Man. In 2010, the U.S. Department of Labor created a website to honor workers who died on the job. Quote, more than 4,500 workers, lose their lives on the job every year. Below are the names of just a few who have died in recent months. OSHA's mission is to prevent workplace injuries, illnesses, and death, end quote. That Occupational Safety and Health Administration webpage was intended to highlight and humanize workplace deaths, to ensure awareness of tragedies, especially those that could have been avoided, according to Jordan Barab, an Assistant Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. Barab explained, without information like this, fatality statistics are just raw, sterile numbers. The purpose of adding names and circumstances was to impress people with the tragedy that workers and their families face day after day. In August 2017, Trump's Labor Department quietly removed the preamble and the names when it killed the web page. It also took down, without public announcement, the fatality inspection data for all years prior to 2017. Those were just two of many other Trump administration actions inimical to worker safety. Others included no longer posting press releases about deaths resulting from unsafe working conditions, delaying rules to reduce sickness and death from inhaling silica and beryllium at work, delaying rules to lower the risk of railroad engineers and truck drivers falling asleep at the switch or wheel because of untreated sleep apnea, and the appointment to the Supreme Court of a judge who held that a company had the right to fire a worker who chose not to freeze to death on the job. A reasonable person listening to Donald Trump's inaugural address would never have expected these and other actions, assuming he believed what Trump said. Trump declared, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no more. You came by the tens of millions to become part of a historic movement, the likes of which the world has never seen before. At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens," end quote. Those men and women were forgotten again the following week. And it's not just workers whose interests were forgotten, not to mention who were put in danger. By deciding not to implement a rule to reduce the chances of truck drivers and train operators falling asleep at the wheel, Trump put at risk the lives of families driving along the highway, people riding on passenger trains, and many others. The White House called it President Trump's war on regulation. In his weekly radio address in early May, he declared that we've removed one job-killing regulation after another, and they're not pretty, and they're going. And believe me, we're just getting started on regulations. They're gone. Removal of data on workplace deaths, which averaged 13 per day, infuriated Jordan Barab, who was Obama's number 2 at OSHA. As a private citizen, Barab created a web page to keep track of the names of the dead and the reasons they were killed on the job. He called it, "OSHA won't tell you who died in the workplace, we will." After the election, Barab's concerns that the Trump administration would be bad for workers increased when he asked where the Trump beachhead team was and learned that none was coming. Each incoming administrator sends people to scope out federal agencies, learn who does what, and get a feel for the place in advance. Then the incoming administration sends its landing team, the people who will initially implement its policies for each agenda, or at each agency. When no beachhead team came up, Barab figured it meant worker safety simply was not a priority for Trump. He hoped that was the worst of it, nothing more than apathy about worker safety. But when the landing team arrived, Barab realized trouble was coming for American workers, and it was not official apathy, but the start of assaults on workers' rights and safety. Barab said most of them had no idea they were going to labor and no interest in workers' issues either. What they did have was a mandate to delay, repeal, or weaken regulations that protected workers as part of Trump's plan to eliminate, quote, any regulation that is outdated, unnecessary, bad for workers, or contrary to the national interest, end quote. The first sign came when Trump nominated Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Gorsuch was an acolyte of Antonin Scalia, whose seat he would be taking. Like Scalia, he said statutes should be literally read, and if that made no sense, well, that was a problem for Congress. Also like Scalia, he had a habit of consulting dictionaries, often following Scalia's practice of relying on the third, fourth, or even lesser definition of a word when it supported his jurisprudence. Trump's nomination alarmed unions. Jody Calamine, a communications worker of America lawyer, told Gorsuch's Senate confirmation hearing that Gorsuch, quote, is a threat to working people's health and safety, end quote. Calamine cited Gorsuch's dissent in the 2016 case to make his point. That dissent, he said, reveals an anti-worker bias and features the judicial activism that will ultimately put workers' lives at risk, end quote. Those are unusually strong words about a Supreme Court nominee, but a review of the case shows Gorsuch has little regard for human life, at least when it comes to employers' power over their workers. He considers a rigid interpretation of the law more important. The case was about a law Congress passed giving workers the right to refuse dangerous tasks. Gorsuch said, no, you may not refuse. It's Even Worse Than You Think by David K. Johnston.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Thursday. Boy, he just came right out and said it. Donald Trump, yesterday, just during his so-called coronavirus briefing, his little mini rally at the White House every day, he just came right out and said it. He is messing with the post office to prevent people from voting. The statistics are all over the place. I spent some time online looking for this morning because I saw a statistic quoted last night on CNN, which was that over 80% of Democratic voters intend to or would prefer to vote by mail, and that is only true of between 20 and 30% of Republican voters. And of course, the big variable is this Trump virus, and that the Trump virus has killed 160,000 plus Americans, and the Trump virus has infected over 5 million of us, and it is spreading, and it is growing, and people just don't want to show up at the polling place. Unless they watch Fox News and they believe that the Trump virus is actually the China virus, and it isn't all that bad, and mostly it just kills black people and old people. So Donald Trump came right out and said, yeah, you don't want you want money to help out people who are unemployed? Cool. Take the post office out of it. Here's exactly what he said. These are his words, Donald Trump. They want $3.5 billion for universal mail-in ballots. They want $25 billion for the post office. They need that money so they can have the post office work so that they can take millions of ballots. If they don't get that money, you can't do universal mail-in voting. They want $3.5 for something that will turn out to be fraudulent. In other words, if everybody can vote by mail, Democrats win right across the board, and Donald Trump and the Republican Party lose right across the board. And, that's the outcome that they're trying to avoid by canceling the post office, basically, by killing off the post office. The Trump campaign itself has publicly allocated $20 million to pay for lawyers and law firms to sue states to block expansion of mail-in voting. Republican lawmakers are doing the best they can to help out. In Ohio, for example, their Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, announced that, here in Ohio, we will allow drop boxes. So if you want to bring your mail-in ballot and drop it off, you don't have to worry about the post office. Cool, we got a drop box for you. But only one per county. Now, the entire city of Cleveland is in one county, millions and millions of people. And then you got a county out there, a red county, in Ohio with 30,000 people in it. They get one drop box. Cleveland gets one drop box. How's it going to work out? I mean, this is fairly predictable. And then this morning, Bill Cassidy, the Republican senator, was on CNN going, well, there is fraud. Back in North Carolina, there was this guy who was harvesting ballots. Yeah, he was a Republican. He got busted, and he's in prison. Or if he isn't, he's on his way or should be. I mean, but that doesn't mean that there's widespread voter fraud or election fraud that's associated with mail-in ballots. Actually, they're quite clean, they're quite reliable, they're quite safe. But we shouldn't even be having to make this argument. You've got the President of the United States trying to destroy the U.S. Postal Service. More than 1.2 billion prescriptions were sent through the Postal Service last year. And right now, virtually every veteran in America, the VA pretty much only mails prescriptions. Pretty much every veteran in America is getting their meds through the post office. And, people will start dying when their medication comes late. Diabetics will go into diabetic shock. People on blood pressure medication will end up with heart attacks and strokes. Donald Trump doesn't care. The Republicans in the United States Senate don't care. Now might be a good time to call the United States Senate at 202-224-3121 and let them know what you think about this. But Donald Trump is actually enthusiastic about this. He's bragging that he's blocking money to the post office just so people can't vote by mail. Mark Meadows has been open. Everybody's been trying to figure out why, Mark Meadows, who, the cokehead, former head of the so-called Freedom Caucus, that's spelled F-R-E-E-D-U-M-B, caucus in the House of Representatives, has been blocking this. He's now Trump's chief of staff. He's been blocking this, and people are scratching their heads going, why doesn't Mark Meadows, why are the Koch brothers, why is Charles Koch and his billionaire buddies opposed to people getting unemployment benefits? Well, of course, because they're libertarians and they don't think government benefits should go to anybody for anything. But why specifically this? Why this big push? Well, because it's going to help mail-in voting. It's mind-boggling. So I wrote an op-ed, which is up at the top of Alternet right now. And it's also over on Raw Story and a few other places. And it's titled, "If Biden Wins, Get Ready for Trump to Punish America." And I just want to run this one by you, too. And, ask the question, do you think Trump is going to get away with this? And am I missing something about what we can do about this? I mean, I'm saying call Republican senators at 202-224-3121. Tweet at Republican senators. I tweeted at Bill Cassidy this morning saying, that was a pathetic performance on CNN. Am I missing something here? How do you think this is going to play out? And I've got a couple scenarios I want to share with you. The first is Trump punishes America if he loses. The second, which came from a couple of military people, is Trump basically ends democracy in America if he loses. These are both if he loses scenarios. I don't really have an if he wins scenario because I think it's fairly clear that he's not going to, unless he can steal the election. As I've said for years, Republicans can only win elections when they cheat. And, you know, the basic bottom line here is that, you know, African Americans have and Hispanics have suffered from voter suppression for centuries. Certainly, yeah, well over a century. And now with the post office, Trump is trying to do voter suppression to everybody, which is all those white people out there. And, you know, if you get enough white people pissed off, is that gonna stop him? But anyhow, you know, if Trump wins, he has tweeted multiple times that if he loses, the stock market will crash. Well, he's now set up that scenario. Jerome Powell, who is not an economist, he's a former managing director or partner at Carlyle Group, the big, fund, private equity fund that funds defense contractors. That's one of the places where he made his tens of millions of dollars, the chairman of the Fed. And Trump brought him in, and he has now invented $7 trillion out of thin air. I mean, literally created it out of thin air and used it to buy stocks and bonds in major corporations to support the stock market. It's the only reason the stock market hasn't crashed. So what happens if Joe Biden is declared the winner, say on November 20th? Say it takes a couple of weeks to count the ballots because of the mail-in ballots and everything else. And on November 20th, the states all certify, yep, Joe Biden won. Well, in scenario one, and we'll get to scenario two after the break, in scenario one, Jerome Powell says, okay, we're out of here. We're not going to support the stock market anymore. And boom, the market collapses. All the talking heads come out in very serious voices and say, well, the market has its own intelligence. It knew that a Democrat would raise taxes and it's going to crash the economy, so there you go. And the stock market goes down to 7,000, and Joe Biden is now inheriting a worse economy than Barack Obama inherited when George W. Bush crashed the economy in 2008. And frankly, I think it'll be a worse economy than when Republican President Herbert Hoover crashed the economy in 1930. How do you think this is going to play out?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And in a few minutes, I'll share with you this open letter to General Mark Milley, which is worth being concerned about. And welcome back. Tony in Shirley, New York. Hey, Tony, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Dave. How you doing today? Hi, Tom. I'm sorry. My apologies. I was looking at a friend of mine. Listen,
it's quite all right.
I believe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had called in and we had spoken regarding the Postmaster General and the potential for rigging the election. And now, obviously, this has taken on much more national clout than the last time you and I had spoken. But that being said, I was curious as to whether or not maybe some of the attorney generals in a majority of the states could possibly get together and file a lawsuit against the Trump administration, and hopefully getting it to a higher level of maybe to the Supreme Court in time, letting them know that they're violating Article 1 of the Constitution by what they're doing, what they're imposing on the post office, and possibly salvaging this election prior to the mail-in voting.
Because Article 1 gives Congress the authority to fund the post office, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, that would be Article 1, Section 8. The problem is, and this is the problem at this point in time, I mean, we are, fewer than 3 months out from the election, really fewer than a month and a half out, less than a month and a half out from the beginning of mail-in voting,
So we should have been a little bit more proactive on this, I guess.
Well, we should have seen it coming. We should have realized that this guy, Donald Trump and the Republican Party will do whatever it takes to stay in power, period, full stop. including massive cheating, including destroying government, federal institutions that literally date back to Benjamin Franklin. This is a naked power grab. This is an attempt to turn America into a tin pot dictatorship. Period. Full stop. This is Donald Trump using the instrument of government to assure his own continued hold on power. That's what they do. That's what they did. That's what the guy did. That's what Lukashenko, or whatever his name is, did in Belarus.
In Belarus, yeah.
Lukashenko. Yeah. I mean, and they're in the streets literally today.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that, and it's sad what's been going on there for many years. But I guess on a different note, I'm just curious as to why during his tenure, Obama-Biden, when they had Congress, when they had the Senate and Congress, did not try to overturn that 2006 law, which basically forced the Postal Service into bankruptcy.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of things that it would have been nice if Obama had gotten around to. The fact of the matter is he only had 72 working days where he had a filibuster-proof Senate, and then Mitch McConnell blocked everything going forward after that. So, it's hard to blame Obama for this. Frankly, I mean,
no, I'm not trying to blame him. I'm just curious. I am not trying to blame him, not by a long shot. Yeah. I mean, I thought he was one of the most eloquent presidents, and I dearly miss him. And it's good to hear his voice again. But it would have been nice to have seen at least some kind of a valiant attempt on their part to try to reverse the course that this was put on.
I don't think anybody could have predicted 10 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever. More like 10 years ago, I guess now, that Donald Trump would try to take down the post office. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. Yeah, the Republicans never should have been allowed to get away with this in the first place. But I totally get what you're saying. Tony, thank you. Thanks for the call and thanks for the comments and the conversation. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around. I got to share this open letter to General Milley when we come right back. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. We're having a coronavirus-safe book tour. I'll be at Powell's virtual bookstore event in conversation with David Corton, Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to powells.com and get your tickets for the live stream event. And on Friday, September 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be at a Town Hall Seattle virtual event, and you can get your tickets for that live stream event at townhallseattle.org. There are also links at thomhartmann.com. I'll be taking you from the birth of America through FDR to the Reagan Revolution and today. In the foreword of my book, Ralph Nader says, "This is the most important, dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation," end quote. So be sure to go to thomhartmann.com and sign up for one of these 2 great virtual book signings. Powell's in Portland and Town Hall Seattle. Don't miss it and sign up now. Tag you're it. So this is a letter, this was published over at defense1.com, a kind of military defense-based website. It's by John Nagel and Paul Yingling. John Nagel is a retired Army officer and veteran of both Iraq wars, head of the school at the Haverford School outside Pennsylvania. And Paul Yingling is a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, served 3 tours in Iraq, another in Bosnia, and a 5th in Operation Desert Storm. They wrote this letter over at defense1.com to General Milley, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they start out by reminding him of his oath to, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they write, I'm just going to quote from pieces of this letter. If Donald Trump refuses to leave office at the expiration of his constitutional term, the United States military must remove him by force, and you must give that order. Due to a dangerous confluence of circumstances, the once unthinkable scenario of authoritarian rule in the United States is now a very real possibility. First, I'm going to sneeze here, I think. Hang on. First, as Mr. Trump faces near certain electoral defeat, he is vigorously undermining public confidence in our elections. Second, Mr. Trump's defeat would result in his facing not merely political ignominy, but also criminal charges. Third, Mr. Trump is assembling a private army capable of thwarting not only the will of the electorate, but also the capacities of ordinary law enforcement. When these forces collide on January 20th, 2021, the U.S. military will be the only institution capable of upholding our constitutional order. They go on, basically what they're saying is they're anticipating Trump loses. And then, noon on January 20th is the day that the Constitution and the law say that the White House is handed over to Joe Biden. So continuing with their letter. The stakes of the 2020 election are especially high for Mr. Trump. In defeat, he will likely face criminal prosecution. And then they go through, the Manhattan District Attorney, Deutsche Bank. He pressured the ambassador to Great Britain to move the British Open. Many examples that could lead to federal charges. And then they go on to say, Mr. Trump is following the playbook of dictators throughout history. He is building a private army answerable only to him. When Caesar faced the prospect of a trial in Rome, he didn't return to face his day in court. He unleashed an army personally loyal to him alone on the Roman government. No student of history, Mr. Trump nevertheless appears to be following Caesar's example. The president's use of militarized Homeland Security agents against domestic political demonstrations constitutes the creation of a paramilitary force unaccountable to the public. The members of this private army, often lacking police insignia or other identification, exist not to enforce the law, but to intimidate the president's political opponents. These powerful cross currents, Mr. Trump's electoral defeat, his assault on the integrity of our elections, his impending criminal prosecution, and his creation of a private army will collide on January 20th. Senate Republicans, they write, this is a letter to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Senate Republicans, already reduced to supplicant status, will remain silent and inert, as much to obscure their complicity as to retain their majority. Now, this is why I'm saying call the Republicans in the United States Senate now and let them know what you think about this at 202-225-3121 or 224-3121. They both get to the same place. Senate Republicans will remain silent. Mr. Trump will dismiss the Biden win as fake news. The courts will take months working through the docket, producing reasoned rulings that Trump will alternately appeal and ignore. Then the clock will strike at 1 minute after noon, January 20th, 2001, and Donald Trump will be sitting in the Oval Office. The street protests will inevitably swell outside the White House, and the ranks of Trump's private army will grow inside its grounds. The Speaker of the House will declare the Trump presidency at an end and direct the Secret Service and federal marshals to remove Trump from the premises. These agents will realize that they are outmanned and outgunned by Trump's private army, and the moment of decision will arrive. At this moment of constitutional crisis, only two options remain. Under the first, U.S. military forces escort the former president from the White House grounds. Trump's little green men, so intimidated to lightly armed federal law enforcement agents, step aside and fade away. Under the second, the U.S. military remains inert while the Constitution dies. As the senior military officer of the United States, the choice between these two options lies with you. Should you remain silent, you will be complicit in a coup d'etat. And then they remind Mark Milley of his oath. I, Mark Milley, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bring true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, and they go through this whole thing. So help me God. And they close it by saying, the fate of our republic may well depend on your adherence to this oath. Will Mark Milley keep his oath? Will Donald Trump leave office? Will his attack on the post office succeed? Will we be able to shame the Republic? I guess the biggest question here, since really the power in the Senate lies with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, and they're the ones who are enabling Trump to do this, can they be shamed? Can they be influenced?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And if you call the Senate, call in and tell us what happened when you called at 202-224-3121, the number for the Senate switchboard. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different, inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and eminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
On this week's Science Revolution, is a drug maker sitting on a possible COVID-19 cure just due to greed? Dr. Stephen Anstrop, chief scientist for Polar Bears International, is here. Could polar bears be lost by 2100? Food and Water Watch's Tony Corbo dissects Cory Booker's bill to protect meat packers and why it's important. In Geeky Science, we'll talk about why the coronavirus vaccine may not work well for obese people and how that's a big problem. And lastly, Michelle Obama speaks about anxiety during the pandemic and what we can all do. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Rhode Island had a law that said that, and by the way, several states have this. I believe Alabama, well, I shouldn't do it from memory, but several states have laws like this that say that if you're going to send a mail-in ballot, an absentee ballot, it has to be either witnessed by two people. You either have to have two witness signatures, or you have to go to a notary public, to a bank, or one of these a state or federal office where there's a notary. The Secretary of State, who runs the elections, basically, Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea is her name. In Rhode Island, said, we're not going to do that this year. We're going to suspend that rule. And she said, your health should never be the price of admission to our democracy. And she said, we're going to make it easier to vote safely from home by removing the burden of obtaining two witnesses or a notary. This is a common sense step that will protect Rhode Islanders during this pandemic. Republicans immediately sued and said, no, you've got to put that law back in place so that if somebody wants to vote by mail in Rhode Island, they have to have two witnesses or the ballot has to be notarized. They sued and took it to the Supreme Court that fast, probably thinking that the Supreme Court would agree with them. The Supreme Court just said, no, we're going to let Rhode Island do whatever they want, which is real interesting. I mean, this is the first defeat. This is, I think, the fourth or fifth case now that the Supreme Court has ruled on in the last couple of weeks that have to do with helping Republicans, stifle or make it harder and harder for people to vote. And this is the first one that has gone, against the administration. So we'll see how this plays out. Tom in Jerusalem, Israel. Oh, you guys are having your own problems there. Although that deal with the UAE today looks like actually a good thing. Anyhow, Tom, what's on your mind?
But on the post office, holding the federal mail is a felony. It's a felony. This is the reason that Grover Cleveland deployed federal troops in 1893 during the railway strike during the Pullman. That was the reason that they came in and arrested Eugene V. Debs and threw him into jail. So what are the Democrats doing?
Really? Because his strike was slowing down the mail? That was the excuse they used?
It was slowing down the mail. This was the reason that Grover Cleveland brought in federal troops to suppress the strike, because he said we have to get the mail moving. So,
Wow.
What exactly is Nancy Pelosi and the Congress doing, and just sitting there and letting the president do this? I don't get it. I just don't. I don't understand.
Well, Nancy Pelosi doesn't have access to police powers. Congress has no police powers outside of their own chamber. They have a sergeant at arms who has police authority within the Capitol building, but that's it. The police powers are entirely reserved, by the second Article 2 of the Constitution to the executive branch, to the president. So if somebody's going to, break a strike, or if somebody's going to force the post office to go back to work, it's got to be the executive branch, and the head of the executive branch, of course, is Donald Trump. So that's what's going on. But thank you for that bit of history, Tom. I'm going to do a deep dive on that when we get off the air. I really appreciate it, and it should be, a poll star for what's going on. Thank you, Dave in Manhattan. Hey, Dave, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today? Dave? No, Dave. Okay, let's try Jim in Sacramento, California. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to talk about the possibility of Trump remaining in the White House after inauguration on January 2021. I'm as worried as you and everyone else about Trump stealing the election and all this business about the post office. I agree with you 100% on all that. I don't worry, however, about him staying in the White House if Biden wins the election. And the reason why is because the first thing that will happen is the electoral votes will be counted in Congress. And if Biden wins the most, he'll be declared the winner. And then on January 20, 2021, Chief Justice Roberts will swear Biden in as the president. At that moment, he will be president. And Trump will simply be a trespasser if he refuses to leave. He'll have zero power. Nobody will follow an order that he gives, and that'll be that.
Let's hope. I mean, what happens if 100,000 bikers show up, and if police from all over the country who feel that their loyalty is to Donald Trump rather than the Constitution or this country show up?
Yeah, well, I worry about violence from the right-wingers, of course. But it'll kind of be dissipated because the big impact will be first on Election Day or within a few weeks after. It'll become clear that Biden wins. There'll be fury and all this turmoil. Then the electoral votes will be counted sometime, I think, in December. I'm not sure. And by the time January 20 rolls around, I think the violence will be dissipated to the point where it won't be an existential threat to USA, as dreadful as it might otherwise be. But those are my thoughts.
Well, I hope so, Jim. I hope so. I'm a couple of weeks ago, that recently, I would have completely agreed with you. Right now, I'm reserving judgment. I am very, very concerned about the things that this guy is doing. Tim in Belle Plaine, Iowa. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I was wondering, with Citizens United and the other laws, why can't we just buy a few sitting Republican senators and get a new Senate Majority Leader in place in the next month?
That's not...
I'm ready to kick in some money.
Yeah, I get it. And Tim, that's not such a crazy idea. And in fact, I mean, you could, I think you could argue that if there was a Democratic equivalent of Charles Koch and his network and all these right-wing billionaires who basically provide a political and economic safety net to right-wing Republican politicians. Do what we say, and if you get voted out, we will make sure that you've got $1 million a year job in private industry when you leave. And if you don't get voted out, we will continue to, fund your elections and fund your private life and give you access to our private jets to fly around and all this kind of stuff. There is no infrastructure like that on the left. So, for example, Bill Cassidy went on TV this morning on CNN and, started talking about, voter fraud and mail-in ballots. Well, Bill Cassidy is owned by big, right-wing billionaires and big corporations, period, full stop. And so, of course, he's going to say what he's saying. But if the amount of money it would take to buy Bill Cassidy away from the billionaires and the big corporations whose butts he's kissing right now is, frankly, I think beyond any Democratic charity. I just think, I just don't see it happening. But, I get your point. Angela in New York City. Hey, Angela, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to call in because you asked what people think is going to happen with the upcoming election. And from my perspective, and I've been thinking this for years since he came into office, everything's going according to how Trump wanted it to go. He did an interview back in 2014 where he said, riots in the streets and, collapsing the economy. And if we let that happen, then we can go back to when things were great. These things are happening. I mean, he's kneecapping the American people the same way he's kneecapping the post office, and he's rendering it impossible for people to just survive. They're not doing anything about unemployment. They're not doing anything. The Republicans have literally walked away. My concern, it's not concern, my fears are that we are sleepwalking into a coup here, because I can see Trump not only stealing the election, but just declaring himself the winner. And on the Democratic side, on our side, on the people's side, there is no organization to fight this. People are struggling with virus, they're struggling with finances, they're struggling with so many different issues. People feel helpless, and there's no organization. And Trump is just going according to what he said 6 years ago. Not just him, the entire right wing. I mean, this is something that's been boiling for 40 years. They want a state. They want things to go back to the way they were before FDR, before the New Deal, when things were just rich, poor, where there's no safety for people who are working. This is what they want to accomplish. Look at them trying to force kids back into school. I don't understand how people aren't more alarmed. I know that people are frightened and they're dealing with a lot, and I do speak to people who are alarmed, but I don't see any organized opposition to Trump, and I'm very worried about that because I think it's going to be absolute chaos. This election is going to be something we've never done
I share your
before.
Concerns, Angela. I absolutely share your concerns. And I see the, I've been watching for 3.5 years Donald Trump sabotage America. Whether he's doing it because he wants to be a tin pot dictator or he's doing it because somebody's giving him a lot of money, or both. I think both are probable. Angela, thank you.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Patrick in Long Island, New York. Hey, Patrick, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I was just listening to the young lady, Angela, from Manhattan, and she was, besides being very eloquent and well-spoken, she echoed quite a bit of what I feel is that, from day one, there was the thought of what happens if Trump never leaves, and what are we going to do? And my feeling all along has been that he will, to use the parlance of whatever, that he will lawyer up immediately, and anything short of numbers that favor him, he will fight and, be litigious about it. And I can very well see John Roberts saying, Mr. Trump is in court, he has ongoing cases about the election, and I cannot swear in Joe Biden. And then we have the various people from Fox News who will tell people, please go to the White House, and mom and dad, the kids will jump in a wagon and go down there with the flag, and the bikers will be there, and the cops, and what have you. And then we have ugly situation in the streets. Something that hasn't happened in this country. It happens to other countries, and we watch it on the TV and look at it with, of respect and awe, but also with, the curiosity of Jesus could erupt into something nasty any minute. And as I said, being from Long Island, I've seen Trump try to do development projects. He's tenacious. He hangs on like a dog. He loves to tie people up legally. And my feeling is, as I said, he will challenge it in court. Court will say that Mr. Trump has a case pending, and we cannot swear in Joe Biden. And Trump sits there, and next thing we know, it's summer vacation for us. So, good topic, and hope I added to the conversation there, Tom. Take care.
Yeah, you did, Patrick, and particularly, your point that you've seen Donald Trump do this in his business life over the years, just makes so much sense. It's just,
of all his psychological problems, the one he definitely has is tenacity, and he loves to do what is the most outrageous thing. So he has chaos around him, and he loves to thrive in the chaos.
Yeah, got it. Patrick, thank you. Thanks for the call. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind today?
Professor, y'all have to forgive me, but I ain't scared. That fool gonna lose, and he gonna leave the White House. That Second Amendment goes both ways. Yeah, we know about the right wingers, flashing their guns, but there's some people that vote Democrat. They got guns too. And I promise you, on an election night, we ain't gonna have to wait. Post offices late with the ballots and all that stuff. On election night, if the public is going to know, it's going to be leaning to Mr. Biden and Mr. Harris. They won, and he gone. All this other stuff, this narrative, these what ifs, and if they don't bother me, they really don't. One thing about this country, we ain't got nothing else. If we ain't got nothing else, we got stability, although this guy's trying to wreck that. But he's going to be gone election night, everybody. Calm down. He's gone. Talk to you later.
Okay, Morris, thank you. I hope you are right. I pray to God that you are right, Morris. Because this country is in a crisis right now, like I think one we have not seen since 1860, or 1861. This is within weeks of Lincoln getting sworn in, as I recall, the South seceded, and that was the end of that. Maybe it was right after he got elected, we have been through tough times before, and we have made it. But we lost 600,000 plus lives in the Civil War. And I don't want to see that repeated. I don't know how to say it beyond that. We'll be right back. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, later on in the program today, Dr. Rob Scott is going to be with us from the Economic Policy Institute about restoring manufacturing jobs. And how that might play out, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. Victoria Jones is going to drop by. Britain has slid into the worst recession or depression since the 1930s. Again, Mr. Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson, following the path of the Trump administration. And in our third hour, Elise Hogue will be with us about the lie that binds, how abortion was weaponized as a political tool. And it's going to be a fascinating conversation in our third hour today. Tomorrow is Anything Goes Friday typically, but in our second hour tomorrow, the full hour will be Congressman Ro Khanna. He represents Silicon Valley, the California area, in the U.S. House of Representatives and is the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He announced late yesterday or early this morning, it's all over the news this morning, that he is also one of the vice chairs. I believe he's the head of the California delegation, or he's up there in the California delegation. And he has announced that he will not vote for the Democratic platform because it does not contain Medicare for all. And that's fascinating. So we'll hear from Congressman Khanna in our second hour tomorrow. So just an FYI on everything that's going on with the show today and tomorrow. But picking up your phone calls, Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback onto the letter that you read earlier from the retired military officers. Mm-hmm. On June 3rd, after Lafayette Square, the U.S. came from the U.S. Army Department of Public Affairs Secretary of the Army McCarthy, General McConville, and Sergeant Major Grinston issued a statement and reaffirming that, they talked about racial issues, and then they just reaffirmed the fact that every soldier and Department of the Army civilian swears an oath to support and defend the Constitution, and they go on to say that they protect the people to peaceably assemble and, for redress of grievances. And it says they continue to support and defend those rights, whether it's from overseas, from COVID-19 at home, or from violence in our communities that threatens to drown out their voices. So it might be something that folks would want to check out. It's not that long a statement, but it's very powerful.
Have they been fired yet?
I don't know.
Trump has been talking about firing Milley because after Milley apologized for showing up at Tahrir Square, a.k.a. Lafayette Square, a.k.a. now Black Lives Matter Square, that when he showed up in fatigues, he has now publicly apologized for that. And Trump was very upset about that.
Yeah.
So,
I haven't looked that up.
He still has 4 months, 5 months to get rid of these guys and replace them with toadies, like he's done with the Fed, like he's done with the Post Office, like he's done with the Interior Department, like he's done with the EPA, like he's done with the USDA. I mean, I could go through the list, right? It's nasty, evil stuff that's going on. Just, it's amazing. Nancy, thank you. Spot on. Terry in Eugene, Oregon. Hey, Terry, what's up?
Hey, thanks, Tom, for taking my call. The question to you is, since Donald Trump has been systematically destroying the government, I see Biden as a one-term president. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Do you think his time is going to be spent going back through everything Trump has done to fix everything? And if so, is that going to take away from his presidency or potential legacy? One more question.
Well, I certainly hope so. And I don't think it'll take 4 years. I think it'll probably take a year. But, I certainly hope so, that he can clean up this mess that Trump has created and put the government back together. But the fact of the matter is that there are, over 100 federal agencies now that Trump has basically closed that just, are going to have to be restarted from scratch, most of them regulatory agencies. And, it's just breathtaking when you go through the list. So there's a lot of work that needs to be undone. I do agree that it's extremely likely, it's highly likely, I think, that Joe Biden is going to be a one-term president, and which is what leads us to the right-wing headlines. There's a newsletter I get that's the top headlines from the far right for the rest of us, and the National Review. Their headline: Kamala lies repeatedly in first speech as Biden's running mate. InfoWars headline: Kamala laughed about murdering Trump. The Federalist: Why Kamala's stealth radicalism is worse than Bernie's open radicalism. American Thinker: The real Kamala Harris. Community's Digital News: Kamala is a Jamaican chameleon entering the race for 2024. Ann Coulter: Why are all the Antifa girls fatties? Oh my God. Town Hall under the NBA's selective activism. I mean, he's got this entire right-wing infrastructure, most of it funded by right-wing foundations and billionaires that are just like spreading these lies. So it's
could he be done with
Terry, I got to move along.
Tom? Sure.
Biden?
Yeah, could he just do everything with one executive order, or does it not work?
No, he couldn't. It's going to take. This has been sliced up into a million pieces with a very sharp knife. It's going to take a similar instrument to put it back together. Barbara in Chicago Heights. Hey, Barbara, we've got less than a minute. Got a quick one?
Just wanted to remind you about Timothy Snyder's book on resisting tyranny.
Yes, On Tyranny is the title of the book.
Yes, he gives us 20 lessons. And then one of his number one, when he was on Rachel Maddow's show, his number one: we have to resist. We have to get out into the street. We have to protest. We have to resist. So if he doesn't, he starts something. I know people are ready, and I'm with, what's his name, Moses out of Long Beach? Morris.
Morris.
Long Beach. I'm with him. We are ready to take to the streets if we have to get that idiot out of the White House.
Oh, I agree, and I absolutely believe that will happen. The question is, will it be successful or will it be crushed, like it was in Belarus, like it was in Egypt, like it was in Hungary, like it was in Poland, like it was in Turkey, like it was in the Philippines, like it was in Brazil. I mean, this is the playbook that Donald Trump is using, but Barbara, thank you for your fighting words. I mean, this is the strength that we need. Barbara, thank you very much. We'll be back. Stick around. Thom Hartmann here with you, and we're going to get into restoring manufacturing jobs. Can it be done? Right after the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps hair loss treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is called Let the People Pick the President, The Case for Abolishing the Electoral College by Jesse Wegman. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 20. But what exactly can we do about the Electoral College? People have been trying to answer that question for more than 2 centuries. Since the first proposed amendment to the Electoral College was introduced in Congress in 1797, there have been more than 700 attempts to reform or abolish it, more by far than any other provision of the Constitution. Only one has succeeded, the 12th Amendment, which was ratified in 1804 to fix a technical flaw in the college's design, but left it otherwise intact. In the late 1960s, an amendment abolishing the college and replacing it with a national popular vote passed the House of Representatives and came extraordinarily close in the Senate, but was blocked by a filibuster. At the time, 80% of the American public supported switching to the popular vote, as did President Richard Nixon and other top Republicans and Democrats. To some, this litany of failures speaks to itself. I think it's a waste of time to talk about changing the Electoral College, former President Jimmy Carter said in 2000. Carter had supported a national popular vote in the 60s and the 70s. I would predict that 200 years from now, we'll still have the Electoral College, he said. Was President Carter right? Is it simply our fate as Americans to remain trapped by the historical quirks of a Constitution that is too easy to revere and too hard to change? Especially after the failed effort in the 60s, when American politics were far less polarized to today, and there was no simple partisan divide over the issue. It's clear that a constitutional amendment is not in the cards. But there may be another way. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, an agreement among states to award all of their electors to the winner of the national popular vote, rather than the winner of their statewide vote. The compact will take effect when it is joined by states representing a majority of electoral votes, 270, thus guaranteeing that the candidate who wins the most votes in the country becomes president. The ingenuity of the compact is that it doesn't touch the Constitution. Its target is the statewide winner-take-all rule. currently in use in 48 states. Maine and Nebraska are the exceptions. This rule is what makes presidents out of popular vote losers. It incentivizes presidential campaigns to ignore more than 100 million American voters living in non-competitive states, turning what should be a national electoral contest into a series of bitter, hyper-local brawls. It focuses nearly all campaign spending and policy proposals on a few so-called battleground states, where even a small shift in voting can lead to an electoral jackpot for one side or another. That familiar red and blue map we all obsess over every 4 years, it's nothing but a visual representation of state winner-take-all rules, with each state stamped Democratic or Republican, as though that is its true identity, regardless of how many voters from the other party cast a ballot there. This is bad for democracy, and it should concern all Americans, no matter where they live or which political party they support. In contrast, when candidates know that all votes are equal, and they need a majority of them to win, they're forced to seek the support of all Americans and craft policies that appeal to as many people as possible. The Popular Vote Compact was launched in 2006 and got its first member state, Maryland, the following year. As of October 2019, 15 states in the District of Columbia, together representing 196 electoral votes, had joined. 74 more, and the compact takes effect. So far, only Democratic majority states have joined the compact. And while the 2016 election dealt a significant setback to efforts to enlist Republican-led states, lawmakers of both parties around the country continue to support it, and Republican-led chambers have passed it in 4 states. Critics of the compact call it an end run around the Constitution. And it's true that the Constitution's framers never mentioned something like a popular vote compact. They also never mentioned the winner-take-all rule, but that didn't stop the majority of states from rapidly adopting it to benefit themselves. That's the whole point of the compact. The framers gave states near total control over how to allocate their electors. The fact that the compact is an agreement among states also means that, unlike a constitutional amendment, which is effectively permanent, member states may back out if they later decide they don't want to be a part of it. Opponents of the popular vote argue that no matter how you might achieve it, it's not the way our country is built. As the popular saying goes, we're a republic, not a democracy. The Electoral College is one of the core Republican elements of the framers' constitutional design, like the Senate and the Supreme Court, which are there precisely to prevent majorities from running rampant. In other words, majority rule is not our only organizing principle, and perhaps not even our most important. There are 2 problems, however, with this argument. The minor one is on the surface and involves terminology. The United States is both a republic and a representative democracy. The 2 terms describe the same thing: a government in which the people hold the ultimate power but elect representatives to make laws, policies, and other decisions on their behalf. The founders used the term republic to distinguish what they were building from a monarchy. For them, democracy generally referred to the direct variety, as in ancient Athens or the New England town meeting, where the people literally make the laws themselves. But American politics at the national level has never been and never will be a direct democracy. So any distinction between the terms today is meaningless. As one political columnist put it, to say that the U.S. is a republic and not a democracy is like claiming to eat beef and pork, but not cows and pigs. The bigger problem with the saying is the implication that lies beneath it. The book, Let the People Pick the President, by Jesse Wegman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll get back to putting our politics back together in just a minute. First, I want to talk about putting our economy back together. This is a fairly large issue. If you go back to the statistics that the Economic Policy Institute pulled together from current employment statistics, an analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau, et cetera, in 2018, the United States lost 1,005 factories. Over 1,000 businesses that did manufacturing went out of business, causing 216,000 people to lose their jobs. In 2017, we lost 782 factories, 50,000 people losing their jobs. In 2016, I'm working backwards here. 2016, we had 999 factories close. 33,000 people lost their jobs. In 2015, it was 2,129 factories closed. I mean, this is just continuing. You can take these numbers all the way back to the 80s, when we began this giant neoliberal experiment of moving all of our manufacturing to low-wage, low-regulation countries. And Trump campaigned on this. This has been a Democratic point for years and years and years. Outside of the Clinton administration, Democrats have always generally been somewhat protectionistic, saying let's keep manufacturing here in the United States. There's a whole bunch of really good reasons for that. But Trump has been trying to do this by executive order and by fiat and stuff, and it has not worked, obviously. On the line with us is Robert Scott, Dr. Robert Scott, Rob Scott, PhD, Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy Research at the Economic Policy Institute. EPI.org is their website. His Twitter handle is RobScott_EPI or Economic Policy. And Rob, welcome to the program. First of all, why has manufacturing gone offshore? Let's just start there.
Well, it's a combination of things. I think the most important, frankly, is that we let it happen. It's a policy of what I call malign neglect. And there are several pieces to this. The way we built our economy and the strength of that economy was through research. We let research lag. We used to spend upwards of 2.5–3% of GDP on research, much of it through the DoD, but that helped the commercial sector as well. Well, much of that money is gone. We've lost $200 or $300 billion a year in research. But the worst thing that we did was we allowed other countries, such as China, Japan, and Korea, to take advantage of us in several ways. The first and most important is they engaged in what's called currency manipulation. They bought up dollars, made the dollar more valuable, drove down the value of their currency, and then made everything that they exported to us cheaper, and made our exports more expensive. So effectively, they subsidized their exports to the rest of the world, and really that's the key. They subsidized their exports to us. We let it happen. In doing so, they exported unemployment to us, and we lost, as I've shown in the paper which we're talking about, over 5 million manufacturing jobs and 91,000 factories since 1998 alone.
Wow, amazing numbers. So, Rob, how do we reverse this? What do we do to change this?
Well, we have to decide that we care. We have to decide that having a strong manufacturing sector matters. It matters because workers in manufacturing earn better pay. They have better benefits. It helps redistribute income in our society, creating more good jobs, especially for workers without college degrees. So that's why. What do? First of all, we have to attack that overvalued dollar. The dollar still is overvalued by, I'd say, 25 or 30%. We need to bring the value down. Several ways to do that. We can talk more about that in a moment. But we have to bring the dollar down to make our exports more competitive. That's the single most important thing we can do. On top of that, our tax policy encourages offshoring. Companies pay half or less of the tax rate if they produce a good offshore and bring it home and sell it here, rather than producing goods in the United States. Companies ought to be encouraged through the tax law to produce more in the United States. So that's a simple thing we can do. This was made worse in Trump's Tax Act. That's where that 50% discount comes from. And after that, we've seen a huge surge in outsourcing in industries like pharmaceuticals. So get the dollar down, lower taxes, invest more in workers, in R&D. Those are the kinds of things that can rebuild our manufacturing economy.
Yeah. You said that there are ways to reduce the value of the dollar. What are those?
Well, the dollar was driven up, as I said, when foreign countries, foreign central banks bought up hundreds of billions of dollars a year in U.S. securities, principally in Treasury bills that build up demand for the dollar.
This is why China's sitting on $1 trillion worth of treasuries?
It's more like two or $3 trillion right now, and Japan has $2 trillion. It's about 20 countries. It's not just China. So we got to reduce demand for the dollar. One of the best ways to do that, there are several, but the simplest thing we can do is to put a tax on foreign purchases of U.S. dollars. There's a proposal that's been introduced by two senators, a bipartisan bill, introduced by Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin and Josh Hawley of Missouri, and that would impose a tax on all new foreign purchases of U.S. assets. And think about that for a minute. It's a tax on investors, just those who happen to live abroad. So it generates tax revenues that we can spend at home on foreign investors, and that will drive down the demand for U.S. securities and demand for the U.S. dollar. And
I have read, Rob, that 1/7 of all U.S. business assets are foreign owned. If that's true, or any number like that, how would this affect that?
Well, when companies invest in the United States to produce goods, those are long-term decisions. So we're talking about a very small tax, maybe a quarter or 1/2% one time. It's a front-end tax. And that's not going to invest a business decision by a company like, say, BMW or Mercedes to build a factory here if they decided it's more competitive to build things in the United States. But it will deter people who are buying up, let's say, foreign exchange or treasury bills to hold for a few weeks or a few months. And so at the margin, we can reduce those high-frequency transactions and drive down the dollar without making us less attractive for foreign investors.
Right. I noticed that you didn't mention tariffs or other, barriers to trade, like Alexander Hamilton proposed in 1791, and we basically had until the 90s, as I recall. Do you think that that's too much of a blunt instrument these days?
I do, and one reason is that by imposing tariffs, what happens is in a modern economy with flexible exchange rates, the currency just moves in the opposite direction. So since Trump has imposed his tariffs on China, beginning in March of 2018, the dollar has gained about 13% in value. So essentially that just makes imports cheaper, offsetting the effect of the tariff. And that's what the flexible exchange rate does. That's why the exchange rate is the most fundamental price in the international economy, and that's why we have to attack the exchange rate.
We just have about 15 seconds left, Rob, before we hit a hard break. What about specific Buy America rules for the federal government?
Absolutely necessary. We can create hundreds of thousands of those jobs that way.
And that law the Buy America Act was passed back in the 70s, wasn't it? I mean, it's still on the books. It's just the administration since Reagan have been giving waivers, haven't they?
They have, and in fact, it goes back to the Berry Amendment in 1930s, I think.
1930s, amazing. Rob Scott, Dr. Rob Scott of the Economic Policy Institute, the Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy Research. Rob, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's EPI.org. They do some absolutely stunningly great work over there. Check it out. We'll be right back 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Let's see who's been on hold here for a while. Barb in Prescott, Arizona. Hey, Barb. Thank you for holding. What's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV also.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I was just wondering, since Trump is sabotaging the mail-in ballots, why couldn't we take a picture of our ballots along with our signature for the verification and send it in electronically, just like we do depositing a check in our bank?
Because there's no provision in law that allows that.
Oh, you have to have a...
And I'm not sure you'd want that to happen either, Barb, because pictures are really easily faked and emails are easily faked. I mean, if you want to get into the world where Donald Trump is actually right that a foreign government could be, producing phony ballots, that would be the way to do it, is electronically. I get what you're saying, and let me give you some fuel for your argument. If I can safely if I can safely take a picture of a check I receive in the mail and deposit it to my bank, whether it's a little credit union here in Portland or a giant bank in New York City, if I can do that and know that it's going to be secure, and I can go and I can wire transfer $100 out of my account here in the United States to somebody overseas, as I've recently done, in literally 10 seconds, and know that it's going to be a secure transaction, why can't we vote using that kind of mechanism? Using blockchain technology or using, some of the super secure, highly encrypted technology that our banks use. That's a discussion and a debate that we probably need to have at some point. But up to this point, everybody's been like, we shouldn't do that because it can be hacked. And yes, banks are hacked. And we don't want elections hacked. So, having a paper trail is a good thing. But I'll give you that as a potential argument. I got to move along. Barb, thank you for the call. Liz in Los Angeles. Hey, Liz, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Hi. 2 solutions to Trump not leaving the White House. The first one is if he doesn't leave on the 20th of January.
Noon the 20th.
You turn off the electricity, and if that doesn't get him out on the second day you turn off the water, and you get out the military guard. And as I need to point out to you, your call screener said that's what Trump used to do with his tenants that wouldn't leave. He did those.
You're right.
I didn't think about that.
Joyce is right. Remember the story? There's a story in Mary Trump's book about Fred Trump Sr. Going to an apartment that was complaining about the fact that in the winter they had no heat. It was only 40 degrees, and taking off his coat, rolling up his sleeves, and opening his collar and saying, "Boy, is it hot in here! I don't know how you guys can deal with it." By way of saying, I'm not going to pay to turn the heat back on. I wonder if, a whole bunch of exterminators around the country might want to get together and go in and collectively fumigate the White House, right? Just, start blowing pesticide all over the place. Maybe the pests would leave. I don't know. Liz, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag You're It. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. We're having a coronavirus-safe book tour. I'll be at Powell's virtual bookstore event in conversation with David Corton, Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to powells.com and get your tickets for the live stream event. And on Friday, September 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be at a Town Hall Seattle virtual event, and you can get your tickets for that live stream event at townhallseattle.org. There are also links at thomhartmann.com. I'll be taking you from the birth of America through FDR to the Reagan Revolution and today. In the foreword of my book, Ralph Nader says, "This is the most important, dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation," end quote. So be sure to go to thomhartmann.com and sign up for one of these 2 great virtual book signings. Powell's in Portland and Town Hall Seattle. Don't miss it and sign up now. Tag You're It. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Yeah, manufacturing, that would be a fine thing. Back to the post office. I had mailed a couple of my books to a fellow. His name is Jeffrey. Jeffrey, if you're watching, we had corresponded, and I had I had sent you some books and a personal letter, and the post office just returned it to me because and this is in a priority mail package, because the books made it thicker than a ½ inch. Now, this is a rule that the post office has not enforced since the 6 months or a year after 9/11. Right after 9/11, they started saying if you try to send a priority mail package that's thicker than a ½ inch, you've got to bring it in person so that they can test and make sure it's not filled with bombs or anthrax. Remember that? Well, they're enforcing that again. I sent this 2 weeks ago from Portland, and it arrived in my post box, in my mailbox yesterday, returned to me from the post office. Attention mailing customers, we regret to inform you that your mail was not collected or is being returned to you due to heightened security concerns. This is the stickers that they were passing out back in 9/11. Any mail piece over 1/2 inch thick that uses postage stamps must be, it must be presented by a customer to a retail service associate at a post office location for shipment. And this, I did not buy stamps for this, but there's a stamp printed on the envelope. So, it's like, and so it's like the post office, and it took 2 weeks for the post office to return my own, my package. This is nuts. So, Jeffrey, I'm going to send them out again this afternoon in 2 packages that'll be half as thick, and hopefully the post office will deliver them. But, somebody is screwing with our mail, and I think we know who it is. It's that multimillionaire, Louis DeJoy, who owns $70 million in stock for a company called XPO that is a contractor with the U.S. Postage Service, between $30 and $75 million in stock, and is a major stockholder in Amazon. And who benefits if the post office goes out of business? Amazon has developed their own delivery system now. They've got their own fleet of trucks, their own vehicles. They've got their own airplanes. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And there's so much else going on. The stock market is up again. Why? Well, this is from CNBC. Companies are talking about turning furloughs into permanent layoffs. The market is cheering that simple news. Companies' profits beat expectations by 22%, while revenue only went up 1%. Well, how did that happen? How does a company's profits go up 22% when their total revenue only went up 1%? They laid off a bunch of workers. This is happening all across the United States. Probably half of the people who are jobless right now will never be hired back. American businesses is reorganizing themselves. To quote CNBC again, companies have gone on a dramatic cost-cutting initiative far in excess of analyst expectations that have significantly boosted bottom-line returns. Cost-cutting, another way of saying getting rid of employees, shedding employees. And this is another reason, this speaks to why we are literally losing thousands of factories a day. In 1998, we lost 578 factories. In 1999, we lost 3,800 factories, 269,000 jobs in that 1 year, 1999. In 2000, we lost 3,600 factories, 66,000 jobs. In 2001, and then Bush comes into office and really kicks this up. In 2001, we lost 4,700 factories, 364,000 jobs. In 2002, the second year of Bush, we lost 6,665 factories and 1.495 million jobs in 1 year, in 2002. In 2003, we lost 8,000 factories and 722,000 manufacturing jobs. And then the Bush crash in 2008, we lost 5,900 factories and 1,451,000 jobs. In 2009, you could attribute some of this to the Bush, the Republican Great Recession. In 2009, we lost 13,500 factories, but the number 13,500 and 1.45 million jobs. 1,450,000 jobs. It's time, obviously, to bring our manufacturing jobs back home. But, as Rob points out, we've got to change our tax code. It has been changed. And the Trump tax cut explicitly gave a 50% reduction in corporate income taxes to any company that moves their manufacturing outside the United States. This $1.5 trillion tax cut that Trump passed back 2 years ago just lays it out. I mean, we had Lori on this program talking about this. It's from Public Citizen. This needs to change, and it needs to change soon. But then there's this larger question that we raised in the first hour is, does it matter that we're losing 1,000 factories a year on average if we no longer have a constitutional republic? If we become a tin pot dictatorship? Or will Trump, if he gets reelected, make the trains run on time, as they say about Mussolini?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Picking up your calls after the break. And Victoria Jones, by the way, is going to be with us at about 10 minutes to the end of the hour to talk about what's going on in Great Britain.
Book today is The 31-Day Food Revolution, Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World by Ocean Robbins, with a foreword by Joel Furman, MD. This is from the introduction. Let me call it like it is. We live in a toxic food culture. It's led us to epidemic rates of obesity, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. Things have gotten so bad that most people think it's normal to have at least a few extra pounds around the middle, to depend on an ever-growing supply of prescription medications, and to lose a little more memory and mobility with every passing year. This may be typical, but it sure as heck doesn't have to be normal. Eating food is mandatory, but suffering from brain fog, living with ever-declining health, and feeling like crap are not. The fact is that right now, hundreds of millions of people are hurting from diseases that never, ever needed to happen in the first place. Dangerous changes have been made to our food supply in just the last 25 years that impact how your food is grown and processed and how safe it is to eat. The status quo is driving small farmers out of business, forcing animals to live in deplorable conditions, and producing food that's making us sick. The medical industry and the processed food industry are earning trillions of dollars in a system that's devastating lives and threatening the very future of life on our planet. It's my mission to help put an end to this madness by sharing the truth about food and helping eaters put it into action. That's why I founded the 500,000-plus member Food Revolution Network, and it's why I wrote the book you now hold in your hands. In some ways, I might seem like a pretty unlikely food revolutionary. After all, in 1953, my grandfather, Irving Robbins, joined with his brother-in-law, Bert Baskin, to found the 31 Flavors ice cream company, Baskin-Robbins. In case anyone on the planet missed the memo, we're now pretty clear that ice cream is not a health food. But back in the 1950s, as my grandpa was pumping out delicious flavors by the dozen, not much was known about the connection between food and health. Up until then, most people seemed content with 3 flavors: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. My grandfather was a consummate entrepreneur, and he set his heart on offering consumers many more options, 31 to be exact, one for each day of the month. My dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool. Sometimes he even ate ice cream for breakfast. He was groomed from early childhood to one day run the family company. My dad's youthful innovations included Jamocha Almond Fudge, one of our company's most iconic flavors to this day, and the rollout to all the stores of the famous pink spoons that enabled customers to enjoy free samples. But in 1967, my grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, became very ill. His doctors informed him he was dying of heart disease. I never knew my great-uncle Bert because he passed on a short time later, 6 years before I was born. But I do know that he was one of the greatest entrepreneurs in American history. He had tremendous wealth, a business he enjoyed, and a family he loved. And he ate a lot of ice cream. And in the end, he lost his life and his health at the age of 54. Grandpa Irv was faced with a choice. He could sell the company for a large sum of money, or he could keep the company in the business and take on my dad, then about to turn 20, as a business partner. Grandpa Irv chose to invite his son aboard. But my dad declined his father's invitation, walking away from Baskin-Robbins and from any access to or dependence on the family wealth. For him, it was a choice for integrity, and it's a choice I've always respected. My dad had seen ice cream bring smiles to a lot of people, but
He also knew that unhealthy foods could fuel devastating consequences, and he didn't want to spend his life selling a product that might contribute to more people suffering and dying before their time. So he left a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream to follow his own rocky road. My dad had suffered from polio as a child and grew up frequently fatigued and ill. In the 1960s, he fell in love with my mom in Berkeley, and the two of them set out on a healthy living path. They stopped eating processed foods, they gave up ice cream, and they based their diets on vegetables and whole natural foods. As my dad's health and energy returned, he and my mom moved to a remote little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. They say that they almost named me Kale. I'm glad they took the more conservative route on this one. In any case, we did eat a lot of kale, along with cabbage, carrots, onions, broccoli, turnips, Swiss chard, and many other vegetables that my parents grew, plus brown rice, sprouts, buckwheat, and beans. For a treat, once in a blue moon, we'd have a few drops of organic blackstrap molasses. I think we went through about a bottle a year. Though my childhood diet was Spartan and my family lived on very little money, I grew up feeling rich in health. I became an accomplished distance runner, completing my first marathon at the age of 10. My dad went on to study the impact of food choices and to share what he was learning. His landmark bestsellers, including Diet for a New America, inspired millions of people and helped to galvanize the modern health food movement. The media was tickled by the notion of a would-be ice cream heir becoming a healthy eating spokesperson and called him the rebel without a cone and the prophet of non-profit. Tens of thousands of people wrote my dad letters, often by hand, sharing how his work had changed, sometimes even saved their lives. One of the lives his work impacted, as fate would have it, was that of my own grandpa Irv. Now, my grandpa had been pretty mad when my dad walked away from the ice cream company. He and my dad went years without speaking. But then something remarkable happened. In 1989, Grandpa Irv, then in his early 70s, was suffering from diabetes, heart disease, and weight problems. He'd always eaten the modern diet with a double scoop of ice cream on top. His cardiologist told him he didn't have long to live unless he changed his diet. And then the good doctor handed him a copy of my dad's book, the book 31 Day Food Revolution by Ocean Robbins. On this week's Science Revolution, is a drug maker sitting on a possible COVID-19 cure just due to greed? Dr. Stephen Enstrop, chief scientist for Polar Bears International, is here. Could polar bears be lost by 2100? Food and Water Watch's Tony Corbo dissects Cory Booker's bill to protect meat packers and why it's important. In Geeky Science, we'll talk about why coronavirus vaccine may not work well for obese people and how that's a big problem. And lastly, Michelle Obama speaks about anxiety during the pandemic and what we can all do. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. In my new book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream, I'll be taking you from the birth of America as a revolt against monopoly, remember the Boston Tea Party, to the largely successful efforts of both Presidents Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt and other like-minded leaders to constrain corporations' monopolistic urges, to the massive changes in the rules of business starting during the Reagan Revolution that have brought us into the cancer stage of capitalism. In the foreword by Ralph Nader, he says, "This is the most important dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation." End quote. It's the fourth in my Hidden History series, available where all fine books are sold. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy starts with you. Tag, you're it. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There is a, I wanted to share, well, actually, I'll get to this in the third hour because we've got Victoria coming up. So let's just get back to your phone calls here. Nicholas in San Cristobal, Mexico. Hey, Nicholas, what's on your mind?
Tom, how are you, sir? Two things.
I am great. Boy, we had a call earlier from Israel, now you from Mexico. It's a great day. So anyhow, what's going on, Nicholas?
You're very, very international. Isn't it great?
Yeah.
Two things real quickly. I'll see if I can go real fast. To give you an idea, you were asking earlier, before you were talking about the economic resurgence possibility of manufacturing, rather, resurgence, whether it's possible or not. You were talking about how people feel about the election upcoming, et cetera, et cetera. I can give you a clear idea, and it's kind of scary, but this is what I'm having to deal with personally. I normally go back, forgive me for rushing, but I want to not take up too much of your time. I normally have to go back to Kentucky in September. I was thinking because of COVID, I really did not want to get on 3 different planes each direction to get to Lexington, Kentucky, and back again. Then I got to thinking, what's going to happen post the election? I hate to say it, but I have very serious feelings about what is going to happen, regardless of which side wins. I think it's going to be Biden. I think Trump's people will go absolutely ballistic. They will lose it entirely. I'm very concerned about what they will be doing in the streets to the rest of us. I also think that if Trump wins, that the left, if you will go equally crazy, because I think basically everybody understands the country can't withstand another 4 years of this slow coup, you might call it. So I have had to make a decision to go back to Kentucky in September, the middle of September, in order to not be in the United States during November, especially following the election, because I fear for my safety at that point, which I know sounds very dire, but it's what I'm having to deal with, and I hate it all. However, I think it's going to be extremely ugly.
That's got to be a tough one. I would be very concerned about getting on an airplane right now.
I know.
Delta and,
then
United, Delta's keeping middle seats open, and I don't know if this. I'm pretty sure this estimate didn't come from the airlines, but there was an article about this on one of the science sites a couple weeks ago that suggested that they thought about 44 out of 1,000 people who get on a Delta plane will get COVID, and about 70 or 75 out of 1,000 people who get on a United plane would get COVID. Those brands being because Delta is keeping the middle seats open and United is not, or was at the time. I don't know where they're at now, and I think you could generalize this to all the airlines. But that's anything over 1 is enough to keep me off the plane.
Yeah. I'm so aware of this. It's what's affecting all my decisions, of course, and it's my life we're talking about here. However, it gives you a clear indication of how concerned I am about November, that I'm willing to risk COVID, but not the post-election stuff that I think is going to be going on.
It is
and
troubling.
Real quickly, if I could say about the your previous guest was talking about the possibility of bringing back, or with tax incentives, et cetera, automotive manufacturing in the United States. All I can say to that is I live in Mexico. I watch the economy here carefully. The Mexican government has been offering such enormous incentives to foreign manufacturers that Mercedes has enormous plants here, BMW, Audi, you name it, Nissan, Volkswagen. They're all here. They're all shipping to the United States, and it's not just because of much cheaper labor, but it is, of course, in part that. But it is also because of the government incentives they're giving to these manufacturers. They are flocking to Mexico, I think, to a far faster and greater degree than the United States will be able to catch up with. That's what I would have had to say about that. But you were the one talking.
Okay. Nicholas, thank you. Thank you. And always great to hear from you. And thanks for hanging out in our chat room and helping moderate our YouTube chat room, too.
Not at all. Wish me luck.
Yeah, good luck. Nicholas, thank you. It's great to hear from you. Seth in New York City. Hey, Seth, what's on your mind today?
Hello, how are you? Long-time listener, first caller. I'm actually calling from Columbia.
Thank you.
But I'm from New York City originally.
You're
Tom,
calling from Columbia?
For you. Yes, I live in Columbia.
The country of Columbia.
Here's
what
my
city?
question. The country of Columbia, Cali, Columbia. With regard to the chaos that might ensue if Trump refuses to leave office, my question pertains to the order of succession. The way I understand it is that the 117th Congress sits on January 3rd, and of course the presidential inauguration is January 21st. And so if the congressional races are called, if the congressional races are called, but the presidential race is not, then as per the order of succession, with no president or vice president, wouldn't the Speaker of the House automatically become president at the stroke of noon on January 20th? And further,
that's correct.
If for some reason there was no election at all, and even the congressional seats those races were not called, then the number 3 on the order of succession is the president pro tempore of the Senate. And of the two-thirds of the Senate
which would be Pat Leahy.
not up for election, yeah, exactly, because we have a 35-30 majority, including Leahy and Sanders. So even without them, if they weren't considered, we still have a 33-30 majority. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Nobody needs to sanction this. Wouldn't it just automatically either Speaker of the House or President pro tempore would automatically become president?
Yeah, if nothing happens before January 20th, yes. I consider that very unlikely, but if you go back to 2000, I'm pretty sure I'd have to go back and look at the date line on that, but I think that Bush v. Gore was decided after the first of the year and before January 20th. It took quite a while, for that to be litigated. I'd have to go back and look at it. But the bottom line is they will resolve. Say that again?
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm saying if we arrive at Inauguration Day with no president, then either the Speaker of the House or the President pro tempore of the Senate automatically becomes the president. Trump's first term is over.
Yes.
He can't stay in the White House.
Yeah, Pelosi. Yes, you're legally you're right, Seth. But legally Donald Trump can't rape women. Legally, he can't engage in real estate fraud and money laundering. Legally. Donald Trump cannot go to a foreign government and say, would you please interfere in our election? He's done it now with 3 different governments. But
wouldn't then the Speaker of the House or the President pro tempore of the Senate then become Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces?
Yes. But, legally, yes. But the question is, will Trump's private army, he has basically taken the Customs and Immigration Service, added tens of thousands of people to it. They've now run thousands of civilians through their training program in how to use weapons and do crowd control. You've got, right-wing militia groups that are sending their people through these trainings. We don't know how many of the people who are here in Portland were actually civilians as opposed to military or, whatnot. He's building his own private army, and he's doing it on the foundation of ICE. And, that's like the one federal agency that is so loyal to him that they will, I believe, that they will ignore the Constitution because they regularly do.
Tom, I agree with you very completely, and I'm very afraid of exactly that. I would ask one more point, and then I will go.
Sure.
And thank you for your time. I've heard you speak about this on a couple of different occasions. I've been listening for many, many years. With regard to what I would call decent and loyal Americans arming themselves, because I think it could be, as you say, and playtime may very well be over. And as much as this may be distasteful to people who have no interest in semi-automatic rifles, for example, we may be the final backstop. And as scary as that is, that may be where we're at. I thank you very much for your time. I'll let you go.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I think Americans have to decide, or not even decide, but the struggle. Am I willing to take a life over politics? And clearly, the founding generation said yes, they were willing to. I think, though, that times have changed considerably, and the idea of violent overthrow, like we overthrew the British, or the South tried to overthrow the North, leading to 600,000, 700,000 deaths in the United States. I am very hopeful that those times are well behind us, but one never knows. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Victoria Jones about the Great Depression in the UK, and we'll continue with our conversation in general as we go into our third hour. And welcome back. Sam, and is that Ouray, Colorado?
Yeah. I talked to you before.
Hey, Sam, what's up?
I'm fine. I'm going to stay away. Look, I did watch Lawrence Tribe the other day on Joy Reid's show. He's a constitutional lawyer. And he said that on kind of what the gentleman before me said, that on January the 20th, Trump no longer is the president, I know your concerns, but it is the Speaker of the House. It's not the President Pro Tem. It is the Speaker of the House. One other quickie. Why couldn't George Soros just buy $6 billion worth of stamps?
I'm not sure that George Soros has $6 billion to begin with. He's nowhere near as rich as, for example, Charles Koch. He's a petty billionaire as opposed to a mega billionaire. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe a couple of them could get together and pool, like Bill Gates and Soros could $2 or $3 billion worth of stamps.
Yeah, the rich people are not going to save us, Sam. We got to save ourselves. I mean, that's what it comes down to, the salvationistic thinking. Maybe some rich person is going to save us. We've got to save ourselves. We've got to get out there. But I understand the sentiment, Sam, and that impulse is so strong in all of us. Help us out here. I appreciate the call. Thanks, Sam. Mike in Elyria, Ohio?
Elyria, yes, Tom.
Elyria.
My recollection that George W. Bush changed the way they calculated manufacturing jobs. He included,
I believe so, and Reagan did too. He made. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He included like McDonald's workers and Burger King workers as a manufacturer.
Yes.
Okay, that I thought I was right. I wasn't sure. I know you are, so.
Yeah.
That was
you're absolutely right, and it was a minor scandal when it happened. What I don't recall is whether it stuck. Whether it was something that was, whether it was proposed and dropped or whether it was put into law. There was, a week of outrage and then, people just moved on. I frankly don't remember that, how that played out because, that was like 15, 20 years ago.
Yes.
But yes, George W. Bush did that. He tried to make McDonald's a manufacturing plant.
And
Thank you very much, Mike. Joseph in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Hey, Joseph, what's up?
Hello, Tom. First of all, fantastic show. Listen, I just kind of wanted to reiterate what the last couple of callers had mentioned about in terms of their concern about Trump not leaving office. Well, I work with a lot of these Trump supporters. The fear about what they are capable of is 100% founded. They are heavily armed, completely undereducated, completely living in, like you talk about all the time, that Fox News echo chamber. They are literally not even aware of the points of view that conflict with their own, propaganda, so to speak, that they've been, assaulted by for the last, 20 so years. And it's a terrifying reality because they are almost beyond reaching. I don't actually have any solutions, but all I want to say is that I don't know how the tensions can be reduced at this point because they have basically been moved beyond the point of reason, if that makes sense.
It would require Fox News and some of these other right-wingers to back up a little bit, but I don't think it's going to happen. Joseph, thank you. The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. So the headline over at the Washington Post reads, Britain plunges into deep recession with steep job losses and Europe's highest virus death toll. The article, again, this is the Washington Post. The official numbers were published Wednesday, and they are officially ugly. The British economy has plunged into a record-shattering recession, shrinking by a fifth in the second quarter alone, and posting the steepest decline of any group of 7 nations. On the line with us is Victoria Jones of the D.C. Radio Group, who is an American citizen but was born in the United Kingdom and keeps careful track. Her Twitter handle is Victoria Jones DC. And the DC radio company. Victoria, what's going on in the country of your birth?
Oh my goodness! Yes, this story about this huge recession is huge. Twice as bad as the U.S., 10 times worse than anything seen during the financial crisis. Also, deepest recession since records began. It's terrible. Well, in the UK, since records began. So I thought.
So this is worse than the 1930s?
Well, I don't know, but that was what they're saying in one of the major newspapers. These were all big newspapers. Well, since their records began, and also what one of the these are all the serious newspapers pointed out was that really this all happened based on about 2 months of really bad performance. Not over a long period of time. And even though things have started to come back, the concern is that with reinfection and with, because masses of people are on furlough, getting government payouts. For example, one of my nephews who teaches very high-level sport at a university, he's been on furlough. Well, the furloughs are going to end towards the end of the year. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer is saying, well, everybody's going to have an opportunity. And a lot of these jobs were going to go away anyway. And, it's going to be okay. He said something quite, I thought actually was.
Uh-oh. Victoria? Oh, Victoria just vanished. I mean, literally vanished from our board. Well, hopefully she'll call right back. Heard that funny noise when she vanished. Just a heads up on a few other things that are going on here. This headline was over at Daily Kos by Aisha Kamar. Watch what happens when a fake government agency threatens an essential worker with a lawsuit. And this is from a viral TikTok video where 2 women without masks can be seen claiming, hang on just a second, I see Victoria's calling back in. Maybe I can grab it before Joyce does. Oh, Joyce got it. Okay. There we go. Let's put Victoria back on the board. Hey, Victoria, you vanished in mid-sentence.
Hello, yes, I don't know when I vanished. Anyway, they're going to furlough a lot of people at the end of October, the government furlough scheme. The shadow chancellor, Annalisa Dodds, that's the Labour chancellor, the opposition, wants income support targeted at sectors of the economy that have not yet reopened and those in specific areas affected by local lockdown, because they're doing local lockdowns now, particularly in the north. But the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Conservatives, the right-wing party, is basically saying, well, it's just going to happen.
Tough luck. Yeah, tough luck. Victoria, I think most Americans think of the United Kingdom and Europe as essentially the same thing or very, very close. But the fact of the matter is, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that all of Europe, including the United Kingdom, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and arguably to the late 70s, had a robust social safety net, a strong, public sector social safety net that people didn't fall through. Margaret Thatcher came into office in 1978 and began deconstructing that, and Tony Blair continued the process with his neoliberal so-called austerity programs. And now you've got Boris Johnson, who's kind of the Donald Trump of the United Kingdom, continuing this tradition of, screw the workers, screw the average person. We don't need no stinking social safety net. We're going to make Great Britain, safe for billionaires, but not the average person. So the situation in Denmark or Germany or France or Spain is radically different in terms of, people being caught by the social safety net than the United Kingdom. Do I have that right?
Oh, I think you have it right. I think also there is a sense that, and there will, of course, be an investigation into the government's handling of coronavirus, is that Boris Johnson's government and Boris Johnson himself failed to see the threat from coronavirus until much later than other European countries, did not lock down until later. And Boris Johnson himself refused to believe, really, in coronavirus as a serious illness.
Well, wasn't Matt Hancock the Secretary of Health, or whatever that title is over there? Wasn't he talking about herd immunity for the first 4 or 5 months of this?
Yes. And there was massive deaths in care homes, nursing homes, and also it was spreading from hospitals because of problems, and that's been a big problem. Also, Britain is more reliant on the service sector than the rest of of Europe, and on travel and tourism.
Right. Because you've exported your manufacturing jobs just like we did. You know, Reaganism and Thatcherism are essentially the same thing.
Yes, and of course, even what there is has stopped.
Yeah, for lack of demand, or because people are too sick to go to work or afraid to go to work, or all of the above.
The plants have been shut down for now. They've been locked down.
Yeah. What a mess. And Great Britain and the United States seem to be the two countries that are most, the developed countries in the world, the most singularly unequipped to deal with it. Victoria Jones of the DC radio company, Victoria Jones DC is her Twitter handle. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around. We're going to get into some geeky science here, and we'll continue our conversation about what happens if Donald Trump decides he's not going to leave.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps hair loss treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives, we did food drives, we did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So I remember the late 1970s when George Herbert Walker Bush was this patrician Republican who had a big mansion in Maine, and he and his wife Barbara supported abortion rights in the United States in a big way, in a public way. All that changed somehow in the 1980s. Lise Hogue is on the line with us, the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, and author of a new book, The Lie, L-I-E, The Lie That Binds. ProChoiceAmerica.org is the website, and Lisa's Twitter handle is ILYSEH or NARAL. Lisa, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked. Tell us about when and how we went from abortion being a nonpartisan situation that was supported by, like the Bush family, to, this extreme partisanship around this issue.
Thanks for having me back, Tom. I am always happy to come on this show. And this is a really both historic and current conversation, because the lie that we attempted to expose in the title of the book is the lie that the radical right tells, that they were moved to public participation, political participation, out of moral or otherwise concern for outcome of individual pregnancies and fighting abortion. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, as you point out, in the mid-'70s, before, during, and after Roe, abortion remained mostly a nonpartisan issue, a non-political issue, I should say. And in fact, the radical right was mobilized to political participation fighting school desegregation in the late 60s. And then they sort of careened and converged with Phyllis Schlafly and the Eagle Forum's efforts to kill gender equality through defeating the ERA. Both had a similar interest, and it was in propping up a largely white Christian patriarchy against a backdrop of an incredibly changing world in the 60s and the 70s. And it wasn't really until the late 70s that they landed on the idea that abortion as an issue could be politicized and weaponized in service of this idea of halting social progress. The first candidate that took it on was Ronald Reagan in 1980. He was very transactional with the radical right. And the first Republican platform that actually contained any opposition to reproductive rights was that same platform in 1980. So part of the goal of the book is to set history straight, because what we saw in the forces that converged around Trump in 2016 was really a realignment of what we think of as an anti-choice opposition, but was really always part of a radical right that was committed to halting racial and gender progress.
So this basically, this isn't just about largely men controlling largely the bodies of women. This goes way beyond that. This is about white male power in the United States. Is that the essence of what you're suggesting?
I think that's right. I mean, look, laws targeting reproductive oppression have always had disproportionate impact on women of color, black women specifically in this country. And you can't actually separate the origin of white supremacy from the decision to weaponize abortion and the movement that actually moved it forward. One of the things that we talked about in the book is that when the Federalist Society was sort of casting about for an issue that would provide a litmus test for conservative, right-wing, aspiring legal minds, justices, and lawyers, they found that antipathy to Roe, antipathy to the idea that women should be able to control their own reproduction, mapped really well onto antipathy towards other forms of social progress. That is a body of work that actually was replicated in 2019 that showed the same among the public. And so gender oppression and racial oppression have always been intertwined, and they remain intertwined, but it's crucially important to understand that we have to tease them out in order to combat them.
So back in the 70s, when abortion was, and birth control for that matter, I mean, the birth control pill was legalized or approved by the FDA, as I recall, in 1961. And there's been an opposition to that, too, among the hardcore so-called Christian right. back then there was no group that said, we're the white male patriarchy. It's become more and more clear that that's the way that the Republican Party identifies itself today. But in the 70s, nobody was saying that, at least out loud. Where was that patriarchy, that white patriarchy, centered in the 70s? How brought it forward?
It's a great question, and I think nobody was saying it because they didn't have to, right? It had been the way of the land since, America was established on Native American land, for hundreds and hundreds of years, and I think that for white Europeans, thank you, for what we, what we try to trace in the book is that there were movement architects, forefathers that recognized that their lock on power was actually being threatened. It was being threatened by changing demographics, but it was also being threatened by movements that were ascending through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And it was, obviously the civil rights movement, which led to the Black Power movement. It was the women's liberation movement, as well as the LGBTQ movement. All of these were requiring people who were committed to a sovereign lock of white control to establish new institutions. And they didn't go out and say, hey, these are institutions dedicated to the white patriarchy, although certainly you can track intersections between the people who did this and institutions like the KKK. But they were people like Paul Weyrich, right, who we really talk about in the book as someone who took money from the Coors family, which we know has roots in Nazism and white supremacy. And they started to build infrastructure, that was dedicated to maintaining the status quo. So whether it was the American Legislative Exchange Council or Americans United for Life or Heritage Foundation or Federalist Society, all of these institutions were built in service of that status quo. And it's interesting that you mentioned contraception, because one of the things we do talk about in the book is, while the FDA certainly acknowledged efficacy of contraception in 1961, the Supreme Court made contraception legal for unmarried women in 1972, the year before Roe. And this had massive implications, certainly culturally, where sexual liberation was really threatening some of the cultural norms, but also economically, where women who suddenly had access to contraception were entering the workplace and staying. They didn't have to leave if they accidentally got pregnant, and they were challenging what had traditionally been a male power structure in the workplace for access to the C-suite. We want pay equity, and nobody liked that. Or I shouldn't say nobody liked that. Lots of people like that, but nobody in this movement liked that. But when they were batting about this idea of, like, how do we build a Trojan horse around one of these issues, it was determined that, contraception was a little too popular. But it is not, every time someone is surprised when someone who identifies as pro-life or anti-choice or anti-abortion also objects to contraception, I say that is absolutely part of the underlying ideology from the beginning. These things are not contradictory.
Yeah, Elise, we just have 15 seconds left. How does this inform us about fighting these battles, or for that matter, waking people up?
Trump is the manifestation of these forefathers' ultimate dream, and we have to understand that we have to take these issues all in an intersectional way, that we can't fight for reproductive rights without fighting for racial justice and gender justice. And we have to lean into them, not away from them, to win in 2020.
Brilliant. Very, very well said. Elise Hogue, the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, the author of a new book, The Lie That Binds, prochoiceamerica.org. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls. And I got to tell you about Russell Kirk, that Elise was kind of indirectly referring to, I believe, right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. John in Queens, New York. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to get to this issue of what if Trump loses and doesn't leave. Mm-hmm. I think that ultimately, historically, it'll come down to which way the military goes. I think this is going to come down to which way the Joint Chiefs of Staff decide. Are they going to support a renegade president if he decides not to leave, or are they going to support the Republic and the Constitution? And I wouldn't want to be in their position having to make this decision right now, but I think that's the way it would break out. I wouldn't worry about the militias or the, Customs and Border Patrol. I think that whichever way the military comes in, whichever way the 82nd Airborne and the 101st come in, that's what would decide the issue. If they support him, I think the cause is lost.
That's certainly how it played out in Egypt. That's how it played out in Turkey. That's how it's played out in numerous countries where an autocrat, a strongman government, has seized power, as they've turned the military to their will and used the military to seize or sustain their power. And there is no doubt in my mind, John, that Trump right now is actively, aggressively trying to turn the military to his side, and whether he's going to succeed or not, he's got 4 or 5 months to pull this thing off, and I'm very concerned. John, thank you. I agree with your analysis. Mike in Winneconne, Wisconsin. Hey, Mike, what's up?
I was concerned with everybody freaking out like their pants are on fire, like these bikers are going to come down and stand behind Trump and fight for him. They're all broke. I guarantee none of them have money to go to Washington, so nobody's going nowhere unless, they miraculously come up with a bunch of money. But I think that's a bunch of phooey.
You know what happened in Douglas County? What state is this? I think it's Georgia. In Douglas County last Saturday, 20 Black Lives Matter protesters were holding a rally, a totally peaceful rally with signs and stuff. 20 people, at the most 30 people at its peak. And hundreds of armed right-wingers showed up. Apparently this had been announced on Facebook. And they were heavily armed. They were dressed in military fatigues. They were carrying assault rifles, bats, handguns, and shotguns. While the Douglas County Sheriff's Office just stood there and watched. One guy came up to us and said, this is one of the Black Lives Matter protesters, and said, "This is a white town. We don't want your kind here." Another one person came up and said, why do your, and he used an expletive for black people, lives matter. 2 teenage protesters were attempting to get in their car and leave the scene. Their vehicle was surrounded by these white Nazis who screamed, "We will effing kill you, get out of the car," and other threats. It just goes on and on. It's like people were beaten. People, these guys are showing up and they are trying. They're not just trying to start violence; they are actually starting violence. And then, I look at Portland here, and I think that probably some of what's going on here has been, agent provocateurs. So, Mike, I'm not quite as unconcerned as you are. I'm far more sanguine about this. I think that these so-called citizens militias represent a genuine threat to the stability and peace of this country and to our constitutional order. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Daily rants and weekly op-eds at HartmannReport.com. It's free and there's no ads. HartmannReport.com. So I was just talking with Elise Hogue of NARAL about, the patriarchy that emerged, the white patriarchy in the 70s. Obviously, the white patriarchy has been running this country since its inception. In fact, women were not even allowed to vote until 1920, and African Americans, in theory, couldn't vote until, immediately after the Civil War. And to this day, in actual practice, African Americans have a very difficult time voting in many parts of the United States, and Hispanics. So it was basically all about white people and white male power in this country. I mean, it's very simple. You have to acknowledge that. But there's also a history of this. I haven't read Elise's book, so I don't know if she digs into this. The book just came out. But I just finished writing a book that will be out next spring. It'll be out in about 7 months. And it's titled The Hidden History of Oligarchy and Tyranny in the United States. And chronicles the rise, the two times in the United States that oligarchy has risen up and tried to seize control of our federal government and was beaten back. And then how it's doing it again this third time, using the vehicle of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And one of the things that I read when I was researching this book was a book by Russell Kirk called The Conservative Mind. He wrote this book back in 1951. And it was published in 50, 51, 52, 53. There were several editions. Actually, he kept updating it all the way into the 1980s. He's now passed away. But in The Conservative Mind, this was the book that informed and awakened and created a movement, the modern day conservative movement. This was the foundational book. This was the Bible. Russell Kirk's The Conservative Mind. This was the book my dad read, the year that I was born in 1951. This was the book that Barry Goldwater read. This was the book that William F. Buckley read that got him started. And so I went back and I read The Conservative Mind. And basically, he starts out, the first chapter of the book is actually about Burke, Lord Burke, Sir Edmund Burke, who said, and I'm paraphrasing this, I'm quoting this from memory, so consider it a paraphrase. It does me no harm if a man as servile as a tallow maker or hairdresser, candle maker or hairdresser, is allowed to work. But it does society considerable violence if such a man is allowed to vote. That was Russell Kirk. He is considered the founder of the modern conservative movement. He was a British politician and thinker and very, very rich guy back in the 1770s. Thomas Paine took a boat to Europe, to England first. He was on his way to the French Revolution in the 1790s because he thought, oh, the French Revolution, this is cool. I'd like to see how that's working out. And of course, when he got to France, ultimately he got arrested and had to be bailed out of France by James Monroe. But that's a whole other story. But when Thomas Paine arrived in England, he spent 2 weeks in Lord what's his name's home, and Burke, Sir Edmund Burke's home, and had this knockdown, drag-out, 2-week-long debate with Burke. And out of that, Thomas Paine wrote a book called The Rights of Man, which was a rebuttal to Burke. Okay, so a little history here. So Russell Kirk, in 1951, writes this book, The Conservative Mind, and the first third of the book is all about Sir Edmund Burke and what a brilliant thought leader, and these are the roots of the conservative movement. And then Kirk, keep in mind, this was 1951, and then Kirk gets into this rant, essentially, about how if women ever acquire political power, substantial political power, they will start demanding equal power in the workplace with men. If the middle class gets large enough and wealthy enough, he was arguing against unionization and against good wages for unionized workers. If they get rich enough, the middle class will start demanding political power. They pretty much did not have it in 1951, the working class. And if their children continue to have free college education, because at that point in time, college was free in California, it was free all over the United States, in many places. There were colleges in New York, there were colleges in Michigan. You could go to college for very, very little money in 1951. And both my parents went to college, and they were both dead broke. And Kirk said if they ever get essentially free college education, if this continues, you're going to have students protesting. And, everybody thought this was kind of a crackpot book. Not the conservatives, the movement conservatives, but everybody else through the 50s. And then in 61, the birth control pill was legalized, and the sexual revolution got kicked off. And women started saying, well, now that I can control my reproduction, I'd like to be in the workplace and have equal pay and equal power. And then, the abortion decision, and then hippies, and then the anti-war movement. And at that point, the entire Republican Party and all these conservatives went back and started reading Russell Kirk again and said, holy crap, exactly what he predicted is coming true. This is the end of the republic, because Kirk, in the conservative mind, basically said, when this happens, when women get power and start demanding the right to an abortion, when students start rebelling against their elders, when women want power in the workplace, when minorities, African Americans and Hispanics start demanding political power and the right to vote, when those things happen, socialism is right around the corner. It will turn America into Cuba. That was essentially Kirk's prediction. And in the 60s, when the hippies happened and the anti-war movement happened, all these Republicans were like, holy crap, he was right. This is the end of the republic. And that's where the Powell Memo in 1971 came from. That's where the Heritage Foundation and all these other think tanks that now animate America came from. That's where Limbaugh and the whole right-wing radio movement came from. And at its core, as Elise was pointing out, was white men are losing their power. Or let's say it more correctly, power is being equally distributed across the United States, regardless of race or gender. That was intolerable to those people.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Just as it is intolerable to them now, as Donald Trump points out, any woman with any power, Donald Trump calls nasty. We'll be back with your calls.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Michael Lewis's new book, The Fifth Risk. And this is from the prologue, which is titled Lost in Transition. Chris Christie noticed a piece in the New York Times. That's how it all started. The New Jersey governor had dropped out of the presidential race in February 2016 and thrown what support he had behind Donald Trump. In late April, he saw the article. It described meetings between representatives of the remaining candidates still in the race: Trump, John Kasich, Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders, and the Obama White House. Anybody who still had any kind of shot at becoming president of the United States apparently needed to start preparing to run the federal government. The guy Trump sent to the meeting was, in Christie's estimations, comically underqualified. Christie called up Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, to ask why this critical job hadn't been handed to someone who actually knew something about government. Lewandowski said, "We don't have anyone." Christie volunteered himself for the job, head of the Donald Trump presidential transition team. "It's the next best thing to being president," he told friends. "You get to plan the presidency." He went to see Trump about it. Trump said he didn't want a presidential transition team. Why did anyone need to plan anything before he actually became president? "It's legally required," said Christie. Trump asked where the money was going to come from to pay for the transition team. Christie explained that Trump could either pay for it himself or take it out of campaign funds. Trump didn't want to pay for it himself, and he didn't want to take it out of campaign funds either, but he agreed grudgingly that Christie could go ahead and raise a separate fund to pay for his transition team. But not too much, he said. And so Christie set out to prepare for the unlikely event that Donald Trump would one day be elected president of the United States. Not everyone in Trump's campaign was happy to see him on the job. In June, Christie received a note from Trump advisor Paul Manafort. "The kid is paranoid about you," Manafort said. The kid was Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. Back in 2005, when he was U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, Christie had prosecuted and jailed Kushner's father, Charles, for tax fraud. Christie's investigation revealed in the bargain that Charles Kushner had hired a prostitute to seduce his own brother-in-law, whom he suspected of cooperating with Christie, had videotaped the sexual encounter and sent the tape to his sister. The Kushners apparently took their grudges seriously, and Christie sensed that Jared still harbored one against him. On the other hand, Trump, whom Christie considered almost a friend, couldn't have cared less. He'd invited Christie to his and Melania's wedding, and he pressed him to attend his daughter Ivanka and Jared Kushner's wedding. "That would be awkward," said Christie. "I'm paying for the wedding, and I don't give an S," said Donald. Christie viewed Jared as one of those people who thinks that because he's rich, he must also be smart. Still, he had a certain cunning about him. And Christie soon found himself reporting everything he did to prepare for a Trump administration to an executive committee. The committee consisted of Jared, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Paul Manafort, Steve Mnuchin, and Jeff Sessions. I'm kind of like the church elder who double counts the collection plate every Sunday for the pastor, said Sessions, who appeared uncomfortable with the entire situation. The elder's job became more complicated in July 2016 when Trump was formally named the Republican nominee. The transition team now moved into an office in downtown Washington, D.C. and went looking for people to occupy the top 500 jobs in the federal government. They needed to fill all of the cabinet positions, of course, but also a whole bunch of others that no one in the Trump campaign even knew existed. It's not obvious how you find the next Secretary of State, much less the next Secretary of Transportation. Never mind who should sit on the Board of Trustees of the Barry Goldwater Scholarship and Excellence in Education Foundation. By August, 130 people were showing up every day and hundreds more working part-time at Trump Transition headquarters at the corner of 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. The transition team made lists of likely candidates for all 500 jobs, plus other lists of informed people to roll into the various federal agencies the day after the election to be briefed on whatever the federal agencies were doing. They gathered the names for these lists by traveling the country and talking to people, Republicans who had served in government, Trump's closest advisors, recent occupants of the jobs that needed filling. Then they set about investigating any candidates for glaring flaws and embarrassing secrets and conflicts of interest. At the end of each week, Christie handed over binders with lists of names of people who might do the job well to Jared and Donald and Eric and the others. They probed everything, says a senior Trump transition official. Who is this person? Where did this person come from? They only ever rejected one person, Paul Manafort's secretary. The first time Donald Trump paid attention to any of this was when he read about it in the newspaper. The story revealed that Trump's very own transition team, led by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, had raised several $1 million to pay for its own staff. The moment he saw it, Trump called Steve Bannon, the chief executive of his campaign, from his office on the 26th floor of the Trump Tower and told him to come immediately to his residence many floors above. Bannon stepped off the elevator to find the governor of New Jersey seated on a sofa, being hollered at. Trump was apoplectic, actually yelling, "You're stealing my money! You're stealing my effing money! What the F is this?" Seeing Bannon, Trump turned on him and screamed, "Why are you letting him steal my effing money?" Bannon and Christie together set out to explain to Trump federal law. And it continues from there. The book is The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis. On this week's Science Revolution, is a drug maker sitting on a possible COVID-19 cure just due to greed? Dr. Stephen Enstrop, chief scientist for Polar Bears International, is here. Could polar bears be lost by 2100? Food and Water Watch's Tony Corbo dissects Cory Booker's bill to protect meat packers and why it's important. In Geeky Science, we'll talk about why the coronavirus vaccine may not work well for obese people and how that's a big problem. And lastly, Michelle Obama speaks about anxiety during the pandemic and what we can all do. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. We're having a coronavirus-safe book tour. I'll be at Powell's virtual bookstore event in conversation with David Corton, Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to powells.com and get your tickets for the live stream event. And on Friday, September 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be at a Town Hall Seattle virtual event, and you can get your tickets for that live stream event at townhallseattle.org. There are also links at thomhartmann.com. I'll be taking you from the birth of America through FDR to the Reagan Revolution and today. In the foreword of my book, Ralph Nader says, "This is the most important, dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation," end quote. So be sure to go to thomhartmann.com and sign up for one of these two great virtual book signings, Powell's in Portland and Town Hall Seattle. Don't miss it and sign up now. Tag you're it. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Remarkable. Lee in Palatine, Illinois. Hey, Lee, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I'm a retired corporate tax accountant, and back during the Bush administration, I used to get calls from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who was supposed to be pro-business at that time. Well,
Are you talking the first Bush administration, 1989 to 1970, whatever it was?
No,
73?
W. Bush.
W. Bush. Okay, great.
And one day online, I found this program of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They had a seminar with these blurbs on what they were going to go through. One of the blurbs was for business people, how to relocate your business to China. That was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce who did that. I had a document that showed that, and I thought I thought that was against their philosophy.
Apparently not. I mean, their philosophy is do what makes money, not what's good for the country, what's good for the community, what's good for working people. The Chamber has always opposed what's good for working people. They've opposed unionization forever. But Lee, thank you for that story. It's not surprising. It's unfortunate, but it's not surprising. Thank you, Lee. Bill in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I want to talk to you about the bikers for Trump. I think you have a little bit of a misconception of who they are. They're not the outlaw bikers, the Hells Angels. Yes?
Well, I was going to say, my concern is not specifically bikers. I was using that phrase as kind of a general catch-all, but most of these people are not bikers.
But who they are?
These militia groups.
Yeah, but the bikers for Trump are a bunch of old guys. They ride gold wings, and they tip over just as easy. My little brother was at a Black Lives Matter rally in a pleasant Hudson Valley town in New York, and the bikers for Trump showed up, and this one bad actor kept charging the crowd and then shouting stupidities. A woman from the ACLU positioned herself between him and the crowd. My brother witnessed him pushing his way by this woman, and he just couldn't take it. He's skilled in 3 arts of martial arts. He thought, what's the least offensive thing he could do? He ran at this man from 50 feet, hit him with a shoulder and a shove, and knocked him 50 feet. 10 minutes later, when his friends picked him up, got him to stand up on his own, the bikers for Trump left the rally. They're no threat.
Yeah.
Stop being afraid of them.
Yeah, the best way to deal with a bully is to punch him in the face. I mean, that's...
Well, he didn't punch him in the face. My brother could have taken his man out 6 different ways. He was holding juggling pins in his other hand at the time. He had to stop juggling to do what he was doing, to do what he did. But like I say, they're not a threat. Don't even paint them as a threat. And what's left of Trump supporters, they're no threat either. They're too stupid to organize. Thanks for what you do, Tom.
Bill,
you're the best.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I hope and pray that you're right. Tani in Brooklyn or Bronx, New York. Hey, Tani, what's up? Tani? No. Tani is on line 7, Joyce, if you want to check that one out. Rich in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good day. I heard a metaphor earlier this morning on Stephanie Miller's show, and a constitutional law retired professor called him. He proposed a interesting scenario where he said, your state, my state, Colorado, Washington, Hawaii, and Utah, their attorney generals could file basically a brief on the behalf of the other states, the rest of the states, to get an injunction against Trump and his limiting of what he's doing with the Postal Service, right? And the mail-in ballots and I said to Joyce, you'll probably have to do a deeper dive, but I'm not exactly getting all the words. But I know one of the things he said was file an injunction, and basically, but it would be half of.
I'm guessing that you're going to see this happen next week, that the states that have all mail-in ballots are now that Donald Trump has said it out loud on Fox News last night, that his goal here is to kneecap the Postal Service so that we can't have a, quote, fraudulent election that is, mail-in ballots. We've got 5 states that are entirely by mail-in ballots. They rely on the U.S. Postal Service. And those states need to be suing. That said, I think that Trump's strategy is the same strategy he's used in business for the last 50 years. When he's constantly refusing to pay his contractors, just like he's refused to pay, something like 60 different police departments around the country now for security. He's got all kinds of cities that he owes money to, millions and millions of dollars he's refusing to pay. And his response has always been, sue me. Right? That's why 3,000 plus businesses sued him when he simply refused to pay them. And, he will say, okay, you want an injunction? Sue me. We'll take it to the Supreme Court. We'll drag it out. Maybe your injunction will take place, but it won't take place until March of next year. I think that's the biggest concern. The easiest way to solve this problem right now is to lean hard enough on the Republicans in the Senate that their will breaks and they stop defending Donald Trump. We're down now to the point where Joni Ernst has taken Trump out of her TV commercials. Purdue down in Georgia has taken Trump out of his TV commercials. Lindsey Graham, I believe, has taken Trump out of his. A bunch of these senators are taking Trump out of their campaign commercials. And at some point, Trump is going to be politically weak enough that they may stand up to him and say no. But it's going to have to happen fairly soon. Serious, long-lasting, deep damage is being done to the Postal Service right now. And it is not a good thing. Well, Rich, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. I love your comments. Tom in Chicago. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I guess one way to lean on the Republicans is to strike. Isn't it true that there's over 500,000 postal workers and they have a good union?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if they organized...
They have two unions, actually. But...
Right. And did a strike, wouldn't that force these Republicans? I mean, because it would totally upset the whole United States if there was a postal strike. Nothing would be able to get
I think
through.
that might turn people against them, in number one. And number two, I could see Trump just using Reagan's playbook then. It is illegal for federal employees to strike. And so if the Postal Workers Union, either the letter carriers union or the other one that covers pretty much everybody else, were to go on strike, I could see Trump just firing them all. And he would have the legal basis to do it. He would simply be doing what Reagan did with the air traffic controllers.
If he did fire them all, then there would be no one left to deliver mail.
Yeah.
You're not going to get
and which may be exactly what Donald Trump wants.
Well,
that's what he's trying to do right now, and right in front of us. He's trying to do this. Tom, I love the way you're thinking, but I don't think that that's going to be the one that's going to work. Ron in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Tom, hi. I share your concern about the armed militias and Boogaloo boys who have engaged in attacks on federal agents during the Black Lives Matter, at least in California and other places. But, I there's no way to tell this, Tom, but the Russian infiltration of our political, and I say, probably also that like militia groups, goes back to 1928 when the Soviet Union consolidated their power. They sent at the equivalent of like $2 or $3 million to organize sharecroppers in the South because they were being lynched in record numbers. But really, their main goal was to foment discontent and turmoil, because that was also the time of the 1919 Red Scare. And but the Boogaloo boys, they've already engaged in military actions, and the federal government, they have prosecuted some of them, but they don't even talk about them.
Right, and they've killed several people. Ron, not specifically that group, but that genre of people have killed more people in America than Muslim extremists, period, full stop. Ron, thank you for the call. It is a legitimate concern, and the FBI is all over this, but who knows in Trump's
Thom
FBI.
Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the home of the political revolution. And welcome back. Cheryl in Milwaukee, Oregon. Hey, Cheryl, what's up?
Oh, boy. Well, I believe that Trump is already setting up this country to take it over. And one of those things is he is billeting his special, what I call them are special troops in federal buildings in towns.
Yeah, the federal troops here in Portland have not yet left.
That's right. And he could sneak more in and more in and more in until he's billeting the whole company.
Yeah.
And then when
do you have any evidence that this is happening in other cities, Cheryl?
Yes. We were the first demonstration, but he has said he's doing them in other places. He's done them in Chicago. And you set them up, and then on the day you specify, you just simply take over the country and put them in every city that you think is going to be a problem for you.
Yep. I think that's entirely possible, Cheryl.
I think we're unwise to keep saying if Trump does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is he's doing it now, and we need to get us on the ball to counter whatever it is that he's putting up.
Yeah.
And protect the people we have in government now.
Yeah.
Like
I am with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree,
Cheryl. And by the way,
Cheryl.
I think you're a pretty special country. You're a pretty special guy, okay?
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it. Cheryl, I've got to move along to the next caller, but thank you for your call and thank you for your kind words. It's great to hear from you. Thank you. George in Palm Desert, California. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Okay, I got a little bit of good news, I think, because I, too, wring my hands over this traitor trying to stay in the White House. But I don't know if you saw Bill Maher last week, and he interviewed Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff with Colin Powell. But,
yeah, Wilkerson's been on this program many times.
Oh, okay. Well, he did say Friday night that if Trump called out his paramilitary goon squads or anything like that, he said that the Army will be dispatched and will take care of the situation, albeit with a lot of bloodshed. But as far as I'm concerned, that would be a great day to get all those guys to, surround the White House, try to take it over, and then have them take on the U.S. military.
Yeah, anything that involves bloodshed in my world, George, is not a good day. But I get what Wilkerson is saying, and I think that it's probably true. I'm just concerned that it's not going to reach that point. There's two scenarios to be concerned about. One is Trump steals the election, or Trump claims that he won the election, and he's got, and the Republican Party goes along with it, even though he didn't win the election. I mean, this is what happened in 2000 when the Brooks Brothers riot happened down in Florida. You had Tom DeLay sending his staffers down there along with Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts, and they were protesting, saying, stop the count, stop the count. George Bush is president. When Al Gore actually won Florida, as we later learned. And that's my concern. Yeah, is that, the Republican Party's already stolen one election. They did it in 2000 by, using propaganda and lies. NBC had called the election for Al Gore, and then George W. Bush's cousin on Fox News said, oh, no, we think George Bush won. And that was when it all went to hell. George, thanks for the call. We'll be back. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. Hi, Thom Hartmann here. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. We're having a coronavirus-safe book tour. I'll be at Powell's virtual bookstore event in conversation with David Corton, Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to powells.com and get your tickets for the live stream event. And on Friday, September 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be at a Town Hall Seattle virtual event, and you can get your tickets for that live stream event at townhallseattle.org. There are also links at thomhartmann.com. I'll be taking you from the birth of America through FDR to the Reagan Revolution and today. In the foreword of my book, Ralph Nader says, "This is the most important, dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation," end quote. So be sure to go to thomhartmann.com and sign up for one of these 2 great virtual book signings. Powell's in Portland and Town Hall Seattle. Don't miss it and sign up now. Tag You're It. Bill in Prescott, Arizona. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom. It's a true honor. I'm your age. It's a true honor. One thing that bothers me on hearing all this thing about the post office, I'm retired from the post office. I was the APWU president for the Prescott Local for over 25 years. But, on Christmas time, we get bombarded with mail. And if everybody in the country just sent one Christmas card, that's equivalent to what's going on with the ballot by mail. And
right, and you guys can easily handle that.
The Postal Service sending ballots in the 1st of November. Right. The post office is used to heavy volumes at times, especially Christmas.
Except now you've got this report out of Iowa yesterday that the Postmaster General has ordered apparently the sorting equipment, the sorting machines, to be removed from the central distribution centers, the central postal centers, whatever you call them, you would know, Bill, and told that people have to sort the mail by hand instead of by machine, and no more overtime is authorized. And so, the mail is now screwed.
That's where we need to get our Congress on the ball here. I mean, this is criminal what's going on. And the other thing that bothers me, Tom, is 85% of the membership on the Prescott Local voted Republican. So basically every election, a lot of postal workers are voting themselves out of a job. Yeah, well, that may change, but I get what you're saying. Bill, thank you for the call. And thanks for sharing your experience with us. Thanks for what you do. Real honor. You're welcome. Good to hear from you. Thank you. Catherine in Baltimore, Maryland. Catherine, you've got 18 U.S. Code 1703. Whoever, being a Postal Service officer or employee, you got the rest of it?
Unlawfully secrets, destroys, detains, delays, or opens any letter, postal card, package, bag, or mail entrusted to him or which he comes into his possession and which was intended to be conveyed by mail or carried or delivered by any carrier or any other employee of the post office or forwarded through or delivered from any post office or station thereof established by authority of the Postmaster General or Postal Service shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. So a Postal Service officer, I assume Louis DeJoy is a Postal Service officer.
Right. He can go to prison for this.
Yes. So I've been trying to get on the phone with all my representatives, but senators are out of session, and my reps are not. They're just. Yeah, and it's worth repeating, by the way. Our caller, Tom in Jerusalem, Israel, called into the program earlier. He's an American expat, and he said that Louis Debs in the 1890s, when the Pullman Porter strike happened. The way that the president broke that strike was by and put ultimately a candidate for president of the United States, Eugene Debs, in prison. The way that he broke that strike was by saying that the railroad was one of the principal ways that mail was being delivered, and because these guys were interfering with the mail, he could put them in prison, which he did. And now we've got guys interfering with the mail, and surprise, surprise, they could go to prison. We need to get this message. Now, the problem is that requires Bill Barr to enforce the law. It's a federal law, so it would have to be enforced by federal courts and by the FBI. And I am not holding my breath for Bill Barr to do that. He's perfectly happy with with Donald Trump breaking the law. Right. But it's bizarre. Is there any way the Congress can file a lawsuit or something? Does it have to all go through Bill Barr?
Well, they can file lawsuits all day long. That's not a police action. The police actions of the United States, the police powers of the United States are reserved to the executive branch. So, yes, if anything involves sending somebody to jail, it's got to go through Bill Barr. Catherine, thank you for the call. Joe in Hammond, Indiana. Joe, you got the last minute. What's up?
I was just at the grocery store standing in line like the pharmacy, and this guy wouldn't get in line. He, oh, it's all a lie. You know, that the COVID is a lie. And then you're going to vote for Biden? I said, yeah. Oh, we're going to be a socialist country, you know, talking that nonsense. And so I told him he better learn how to speak Russian, that Putin's going to be his president, and that he didn't like that. And it's just crazy.
The worm turns. It is.
Real quick, I have a saying, no Trump ever, because the whole world matters. Vote blue for the good of humanity is my comments on a lot of things, Tom. Thanks for everything you do.
I'm with you, Joe. You're welcome. Thank you for the call, Joe. It's great to hear from you. And thank you for being with us today. These are extraordinary times that we are living through. It's important to chronicle them. In fact, it might be a great time to start keeping a diary as a way of helping maintain your sanity. But, you know, also, actually, one of my relatives keeps a diary on Facebook every day. I mean, basically. So there's lots of ways we can maintain our sanity. But, you know, reach out, help each other, but mostly call Congress right now, 202-224-3121. Call your Republican senators and tell them about the post office. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow. Anything Goes Friday, and Congressman Khanna will be with us. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps Hair Loss Treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code Tom.
Hi, Thom Hartmann here. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. We're having a coronavirus-safe book tour. I'll be at Powell's virtual bookstore event in conversation with David Corton, Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to powells.com and get your tickets for the live stream event. And on Friday, September 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be at a Town Hall Seattle virtual event, and you can get your tickets for that live stream event at townhallseattle.org. There are also links at thomhartmann.com. I'll be taking you from the birth of America through FDR to the Reagan Revolution and today. In the foreword of my book, Ralph Nader says, "This is the most important, dynamic book on the cancers of monopoly by giant corporations written in our generation," end quote. So be sure to go to thomhartmann.com and sign up for one of these two great virtual book signings, Powell's in Portland and Town Hall Seattle. Don't miss it and sign up now. Tag You're It.
We say fight back!